Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. I'm a model, and I was doing work for a catalog out of state. During our break, I stated that I was going to walk back to the hotel to get my charger, since it was only a block away. One of the video crew offered to walk with me, as he had something he wanted to grab from the hotel too. We got to the hotel with no problems, but I left the hotel alone. As soon as I walked out the door, a man approached me and said, "I saw you walking earlier." He and I had been in the hotel for about 20 minutes, which means he followed us to the hotel and had been waiting for me. He continued to walk with me and asking me all kinds of personal questions. I tried to politely get out of the conversation by telling him that I have to go to work and that I couldn't talk right now. But he continued to follow me and ask me questions the whole way back to where I was shooting. When I got there, he asked me to come swimming in the river with him. I told him that I couldn't because I have to work. I was afraid to be stern or tell him to F off because I have heard of too many stories of men like this becoming violent in that situation. I did start feeling nervous as I tried to open the door to the building because he followed me and he was standing right behind me. The door was locked. I started running around to every door, trying desperately to get inside as he followed me to every door. They were all locked. Now I'm really in a panic. But then a car with 2 girls inside pulled over and then called me to come to their car. I ran over and he immediately booked it down the street and disappeared. The girls told me that they saw what happened and asked me if I needed a ride. I explained that I just needed to call someone to get inside and that it seemed that he was gone now. I got on the phone with another model and she was on her way to open the door. I told the girls that I was okay now and that he was gone and someone was on their way. But as soon as the girls drove away, the man appeared from around the corner of the street that he left down. He had been watching and waiting for them to leave, and he was walking very fast towards me. I ran up the stairs and I started banging on the door, desperate to get in. He started coming up the stairs after me, and when the door finally opened, I then went inside and I closed it fast behind me. Needless to say, I was shaken. I never feel safe when I walk anywhere now, no matter how short the distance would be. Even walking across a parking lot is a stressful experience. When I was a kid, probably around 6 years old, I had a summer experience that still sends shivers down my spine. It was one of those events that happened quickly and could have been much worse, but it taught me one hell of a lesson by the end of it. I remember that it was a really hot day, the kind where the air does that fun shimmering off the asphalt, and I was home with my mom. She was a teacher at my school and we were both on our break. We were spending some time in the backyard. My mom was inflating and then filling up the little pool that my dad had bought the weekend before, and I was just excitedly running around, waiting to jump in the water. My mom told me to go inside and get us a couple of popsicles, and I excitedly did what she requested. I was digging in the freezer for a specific flavor, blue raspberry of course, and enjoying the cold air blasting in my face, when I heard it. A light knock at the door. We didn't really get a lot of visitors where we lived, usually just my grandparents or our neighbor, Miss Shelley, whom I absolutely adored. Thinking that it was probably Grandma or Miss Shelley, I went over and I swung the door open, expecting to be greeted by her warm smile and some cookies. But instead, there was a man standing there, a stranger, with a creepy yellow grin that seemed to be way too big for his face. I may have been 6 years old, but I cannot forget that face. The smell hit me next, a sour stench that made my nose scrunch up. I didn't know it then, but as an adult, I now realize that it was probably the stink of some kind of booze. I bluntly asked this guy who he was, and he laughed and responded that he was a friend and that he was there to see me. I was a pretty social kid, so I just assumed that he was a friend of my parents that I hadn't met yet. When I asked him how he knew me, he leaned down, laughed, and then said, "Huh, I've known you for a long, long time. I was there when you were born." It was a weird thing to say, but at that age, I didn't really question it. He then followed this up with a, "Hey, why don't you come outside? I brought lunch for us. You like pizza, right?" I did like pizza. In fact, I love pizza. And with the word pizza mentioned, I now really wanted pizza. I started to step outside, but just as I did, my mom appeared at the front door and put a hand on my shoulder. She asked this man who he was and what he wanted. I remember him flashing that ugly yellow smile at her and asking for someone named Melissa. My mom, clearly not convinced, told him, "No one named Melissa lives here. I think you need to leave." He responded with an, "Oh, of course, my mistake," still holding that creepy smile, and then turned to walk off. Without saying another word, he walked out our front gate, got into an old minivan, and then drove away. My mom immediately pulled me back in the house, and that's when I got my first lesson about stranger danger. She explained that we should never trust people who we don't know like that, especially if they're asking us to go somewhere with them. I mentioned that he said he was a friend and that he was there when I was born. And she told me that none of that was true and that sometimes people will lie to us to get us to trust them. Now looking back as an adult, I realized just how close I came to a potentially dangerous situation. If my mom hadn't come inside to check on me when she did, well, I really don't like to think about what would have happened. It's a really chilling reminder of how important it is to teach kids about the dangers of trusting strangers. And it's a lesson that I've held closely ever since. I use this story to actually explain to my own son about stranger danger. I never saw that guy again, thankfully. And I hope that I never do. I, a 25-year-old female, had an experience about 4 days ago that I haven't been able to shake. I was Stalker house sitting for my boyfriend while he was away on a backpacking trip. He is 26 and male. My boyfriend's home is in a semi-remote area at the bottom of a hill at the back of a few arches of property. He's right next to the highway, which has a opposite to us, a small rural neighborhood. It's both very sketchy and very safe, meaning that the community is close, but people frequently keep to themselves, and there are lots of abandoned or dilapidated homes right next to very well-kept homes. A pretty typical countryside neighborhood, I may say. So, I really didn't feel unsafe to agree to watch my boyfriend's property and his dog, Hennessy. Hennessy is a 115-pound jet black American Bulldog / English Labrador mix. He's basically all muscle, and ever since my boyfriend and I began dating, he has become very protective of me and my own dog, Lottie. Lottie is a 57-pound poodle mix. I'm a dog groomer, so she's usually done up in pretty silly haircuts with bows and everything. All of this is to say that one of my dogs is very intimidating and the other one is not. Because of his strength, however, I cannot walk Hennessy and Lottie at the same time on my own. So I usually lock Lottie alone, then go back and get Hennessy to walk him alone. We do about 30 minutes of walking each, and I like to take Hennessy after Lottie at night because I feel safer with him as it gets later. This is important because this was the case about 4 nights ago. I was about 3/4 of the way through my walk with Lottie when I got this really weird feeling that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I looked around to see that about 30 feet or so back, there was a tall man in a hoodie standing next to an older run-down home. I instantly thought that the hoodie was weird. I live in Northern California and it's early August. It doesn't get colder than 87 degrees in the evening, especially when the sun was still setting like it was at that time. I forced myself to brush it off as I tend to be fairly paranoid due to my years of reading Let's Not Meet stories. As I kept walking, the sun kept setting and the streets began to slowly get darker. I would glance back from time to time and I noticed that the man was keeping pace with me, not breaking the 30-odd foot distance. If I turned a corner, so did he. If I sped up, so did he. Finally, we reached the highway and I crossed right before a car came speeding past, hoping that if the guy was following me, this would put some distance between him and myself, which it did. But that didn't stop him from continuing to follow me. I walked as fast as I could to the house, not wanting to turn around. But now, being able to hear his footsteps on the gravel. At this point, Lottie had noticed him too and started to bark and growl. I forced her to keep moving and thankfully made it back inside the house, slamming and locking the door, hoping that that was the end of it. It was not. Moments after that I'd shut and locked the door, I felt someone trying to open it. The dogs heard this too and started barking because they always do when someone is at the door. There's no people on my door, but I can talk to whoever is on the other side since it's a pretty thin door. So I yelled out and asked who was there. Through the barking, I could hear a man's voice that said, "I love your dog. Can I meet her?" For some reason, the way he said it was so creepy to me. It was like there was nothing behind it, kind of like he'd rehearsed the line or decided to say it beforehand. I yelled back, "No," and I asked him to please go away. He paused for another second and then again said, "I love your dog. Can I meet her?" He starts trying the door handle again, this time pushing up against the door. And by this point, Hennessy can tell something is wrong and so can Lottie. The hair on the back of Hennessy's neck is standing up and he's mashing his teeth while growling. At that moment, I don't know what possessed me, but I threw Lottie into the bathroom behind me and I grabbed Hennessy by the collar, keeping him close to the door with me, and he's still barking and going crazy. I hear the man repeat that he wants to meet my dog and I yelled out to him to leave. He paused and then slammed into my door. I say the door moved and at that moment, I unlocked the door and opened it just wide enough that Hennessy could get about halfway out. He's going bonkers at this point, and my hand is starting to hurt from holding him back. I can hear his teeth clacking as he ferociously chomps toward the man. While this dude was not expecting Hennessy. He stumbled back, almost falling over, and cursed as he scrambled to stay off the ground. He didn't even look at me, and instead booked it up the hill as fast as he could and out of sight. I managed to pull Hennessy back in, and I called the cops to tell him what had happened. I never got a good look at the guy, and they basically told me that there wasn't anything that I could really do. But they did take my statement and told me that they'd contact me if anything ever came of it. I'm so thankful for Hennessy. After all of that, I snuggled up with him and Lottie that night, and I cried because it had all hit me on how terrifying that was. I literally went out the next day, and I bought him the biggest bone that I could find from a pet store nearly an hour away because he earned it. Of course, I got Lottie something too. I don't know why this creep didn't get the hint when I had two dogs barking inside. But my assumption is that he didn't realize he was hearing two barks, or assumed that if I had two dogs, they were both like my puffy poodle. That is to say, he was not afraid. I am so thankful the guy didn't have a firearm, and looking back now, I probably should have just called the cops and kept my door closed. But I hope that maybe he saw Hennessy. He'll know not to come back and mess with us, because if he does, I'll let my big sweet boy rip his arm off. My name is Lisa, and this is Mandy's story as she told it to me. Don't worry, I got her permission to share this on here. Mandy and I have been best friends since elementary school. We're both 16 years old, and we go to the same high school. We practically do everything together. We study, hang out, even plan our future college adventures. Mandy is the kind of friend everyone wishes they had. She's very kind and funny, and she's always there when you need her. We trust each other with our deepest secrets, and we support each other through thick and thin. Last summer, Mandy went on a vacation to a small beach town with her family. Her family has been going to this town every year for as long as she can remember. It's a tradition they cherish. Mandy loves the beach and the sounds of the waves and the smell of the ocean and the feel of the sand between her toes. Let's just say it's her happy place. It's her sanctuary away from the stresses of school and her everyday life. Her family usually rents a small cottage near the beach. The town is quaint, with friendly locals and a relaxed vibe. Mandy always looks forward to these trips. She spends her days swimming, sunbathing, and reading her favorite books. It's a time for her to just unwind and recharge, you know. On one particular day during the vacation, Mandy decided to spend the afternoon alone at the beach. She asked her mom if she could go, and her mom agreed, just reminding her to stay safe and return home before dinner. Mandy packed her beach bag with a towel, some sunscreen, and a book, and then she headed out. The beach was nearly deserted, which was typical for that time of day. Most families were either at lunch or taking an afternoon siesta. So Mandy found a quiet spot, laid out her towel, and then settled in to enjoy the sun. She applied sunscreen and then laid back, closing her eyes to soak up the warmth around her. The rhythmic sound of the waves and the gentle breeze lulled her into a state of relaxation. But as Mandy lay there, drifting in and out of a light nap, she suddenly heard a voice. It startled her, and when she opened her eyes, she saw a man standing a few feet away from her. He was in his 40s, he was overweight, and he looked disheveled. His clothes were wrinkled, and he smelled strongly of alcohol. Mandy felt a pang of unease, but she decided to be polite. She answered his initial questions, thinking that he might be a local just making conversation. The man asked her where she was from and if she came to the beach often. Mandy kept her answers short, hoping that he would just take the hint and leave. But instead of walking away, he actually sat down next to her on the sand. But then, his questions started to become more invasive, asking her about her family, if she was alone, and where she was staying. She felt very uncomfortable. She felt trapped, and she wasn't sure of how to extricate herself from the situation without causing a scene. This man's gaze was intense, and he seemed to be getting closer to her. Her instinct screamed danger, and she knew that she needed to get away. Mandy decided to leave. She packed up her things quickly, trying to remain calm at the same time. She stood up and then began walking towards the path that led back to the cottage. The man called out to her, trying to engage with her again, but she just ignored him and kept walking. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she quickened her pace. Soon, the man's calls turned into catcalls and then into threats. He was following her, and his tone had become menacing. Mandy's fear spiked and she broke into a run. She could hear his footsteps behind her, and she pushed herself to go faster. Luckily, given his build, he could not catch up to Mandy. He was very athletic, and of course, young and full of adrenaline. Mandy then reached the cottage, breathless and terrified. She rushed inside, locking the door behind her. She then leaned against it, just trying to catch her breath and calm her racing heart. She didn't tell anyone about what had happened because she didn't want to worry her family or ruin the vacation. Mandy just stayed away from the beach for the rest of their stay there. She pretended that everything was fine, but inside, she felt shaken. When the vacation ended and Mandy returned to school, she finally told me and a few close friends about what had happened. She recounted the story with a mix of fear and anger. She is frustrated that her safe place had been violated. We listened, horrified, and assured her that she had done the right thing by running away. Mandy said that she had learned her lesson and that she would never go to the beach alone again. Next time, she said she would bring us with her, ensuring that she was never in a vulnerable position like that again. We all promised to be there for her, to support her and help her reclaim her love for the beach. Mandy's experience serves as a warning to all of us to be cautious and aware of our surroundings, even in places that we think we are safe in. So, to the man on the beach, wherever you are and whoever you are, stay away from teenagers, you creep. I'm a 24-year-old female, and I moved into my first apartment by myself. I usually have roommates, but my last situation was being sexually harassed by two guys in my house, and also by a 60-year-old woman who was a severe alcoholic and drug addict. Long story short, I have been here for 2 months and it's been good. I love the place, the apartment, the location. But yesterday, I got the shit scared out of me when I received a knock on my door at 3 a.m. I live on the top floor of a 25-floor building and was the first to move in after renovations. So there is only 4 to 5 people on my whole floor. I had no texts, not calls from anyone I knew about coming over. First, they knocked, and I went silent. They knocked again. It sounded like a man knocking. I called my mom telling her the situation and that I was utterly terrified being a young woman. They waited a few minutes, and then they knocked again. My mom called the police for me, and 2 women officers came up. I told them what had happened, and they were super kind about the situation. The only person who I could have maybe expected to knock was the only person who had access, the doorman. This doorman in particular has always had a very strange vibe to him. He never talked much, but he was always watching me. I would go to the elevators and he would get out of his chair to stare at me, waiting for them to open. He is somewhat a 28 to 32-year-old man. I'm not sure exactly how old, and he's a pretty tall African-American man. He'd always check me out, and while he wouldn't say much, he'd flirt. 2 days ago, I was going out with some girlfriends and I was dressed in a tight and short black dress with black boots. He seemed really interested in me at that point and definitely spent extra time staring at me, but I don't really think much of it. So after talking to the police, I went downstairs and I asked him, "Hey, so I got a knock on my door at 3 in the morning. Was that you by any chance?" And he immediately said yes, and that it was him. I was like, "Why are you knocking on my door at 3 a.m.? And he answered, "Well, it wasn't 3 a.m., it was like 2:30. and I was checking up on you." I asked him why, and he then mumbled something under his breath. I'm like, "What did you say?" And he said, I don't know." I gave him leeway and I said, "Because you thought I wasn't okay?" And he said, "Yeah." And I asked him why he would think that I wasn't okay. He then again said that he doesn't know, and I told him that it really scared me. I also told him, "I see you 3 to 4 times a day. Why couldn't you just talk to me down here?" And he then answered, "I don't know." Looking back, I also received a knock on my door at 12:30 a.m., but it was very faint, enough where I thought he was knocking on someone else's door. It was so weird. After I told him to not knock on my door again, he called me and he left a voicemail on my phone. I noticed the random number and realized that he called me at midnight at around 3 a.m. I was super scared because I live alone. Ring doorbells aren't allowed in the building unless requested. And also, the management company keeps hiring guys like this. The last guy was fired. I'd ideally like to actually end my lease, even if he gets fired, which he definitely will, considering the last guy who wasn't nearly as bad got fired. That would be good, but he knows where I live, what car I drive, when I come and go, and also has access to the magnets to get up the elevator. He even asked me a few days ago about my unit number. I am super scared and I hear stories about this all the time. I'm terrified that he will have a maintenance key or something and then he would come into my apartment and hide and wait for me to get home. A young girl was killed by someone who worked in her building. So, what do you think I should do? This happened about 6 years ago to me and my 2 other friends. I'm a 20-year-old female, but I was 14 at the time of this story and we were seeing the new Jumanji. This was my second time seeing it, but I was super excited because my mom had decided that I could finally start getting dropped off when I hung out with friends instead of her accompanying us. After she dropped us off, we went inside, got our tickets and snacks at the concessions, then went to decide where we wanted to sit. This was way before there was an assigned seating, and you could just sit wherever you wanted. Of course, being teens and wanting to be on our own, we sat in the back so we would not interrupt the other movie watchers with our snickering and our jokes. There weren't that many people there, maybe like 3 groups of kids and various other adults around them, but I did not pay much attention to them at all. We wanted to be on our own. And soon after we were settled, the trailer started, and that's when he walked in. I did not pay much attention to him then, but I still noted that he was the last person to enter the theater. I can still remember exactly how he looked to this day. He must have been in his late 20s, maybe early 30s. He was Caucasian, had dark eyes, reddish brown hair, and a short beard. He was wearing running shoes, some jeans, and a white baseball hat, and a jacket over a t-shirt. He did a quick scan of the theater, and he stopped with his head in our direction, and then started making his way up the steps, all the while he remained fixated on us. We were 1 row from the very back, and he sat directly in front of us, right in front of my friend who was sat in the middle. This was the first more noticeable red flag. Soon after that, the movie started. I immediately tried to focus in on the movie, but not long after it started, the man started twisting his hat, so at times it faced forwards, then backwards on his head. That would have not been a problem if it wasn't for the fact that every time he adjusted his hat, he would completely turn his head to stare at us, then smirk for a few seconds and then turn back. It continued on like this for almost the entirety of the first half of the movie. He would then giggle to himself quietly, even if the movie was in no way comedic. The vibes were just so off on this guy, bordering on sinister. By then, I had completely lost interest in the movie, and I remained unfocused on what he was doing. And soon enough, he changed creep tactics, and every time the movie characters told a joke or said something remotely funny, he would full-on belly laugh and then turn around toward us while laughing and making direct eye contact with each of us. And after he probably got tired of that one, he would stand straight up and rotate to face us, smile creepily, and then sit back down. I was literally so tensed up that I had stopped eating my M&Ms, and now my friends had started exchanging uneasy glances with me, and I could tell that they were just uncomfortable as I am. I remember clearly my friend on the left just grabbing my arm as the movie was getting closer to the end and whispering my name nervously with widened eyes. I replied with, "I know, I've been watching him." I had decided to start coming up with a plan. I already knew that the employees here were unreliable, so I decided to trust the only other thing that I could think of without my mom there: women. It was almost the end of the movie, and I turned and grabbed both of my friends' arms and whispered to them as quietly as I could, "Guys, the moment the credit starts, I want you all to run to the bathroom, and I'm going to call my mom to come in here and get us, okay?" They nodded, both looking as terrified and uneasy as I felt. About 5 minutes later, the credits started, and the moment they did, we fucking bolted as quietly as we could. Of course, in my mind, every horror movie scenario was playing in my head with me being the last to leave the row, so when I got to the bottom of the stairs, I decided to do the dumbest thing that I could have done. I stopped and I turned around as my friends ran ahead of me to the bathrooms. The theater was empty now, except for him in our row, crawling around and looking under the fucking seats. This felt like it lasted for a couple of minutes, but could not have been more than a couple of seconds. I was petrified. I couldn't move at that moment, but believe me, that I started moving again when his head popped up from the end of the row, and after a jerk motion scan of the room, his eyes focused on me. I swear, his eyes were so wide that I could see the whites from all the way down there. That's when he got up and started running, and so did I. I bolted out of there, skidding on the slick carpet, and shot my way to the women's bathroom, which was 4 theater entrances ahead of me. I could see my friend peeking out to the side of the entrance as I got closer. I noticed that my other friend was not accompanying her. After I could speak again and I was semi-breathing normally, we headed deeper into the stalls, and I shakily asked her where our friend went. She told me that instead of running into the bathroom, she shot off to the concessions where there are sometimes employees. This might have been my first option if I didn't know my theater well enough to know that it was a 50-50 chance for any employee to be there at that moment. We then calmed down a bit more, for we were now in the noisier and crowded bathrooms, surrounded by other people and adults. After like 4 minutes, we decided to take a peek out of the entrance to see if he was still there. And I kid you not, this motherfucker was pacing back and forth in front of the entrance with the most angry look on his face, staring directly at me when I poked my head out. I still don't know why I didn't tell any of the women around us what was happening. We finally called my mom, close to tears, and told her what was happening. She immediately left the store that she was at to come and pick us up, as she could hear that we were very upset. After waiting a minute more, we decided to take another look outside, and thank God he was gone. We saw our friend standing near the front of the theater next to an employee. Turns out, she had just been standing by the worker and watching the man run in my direction, then pace in front of the bathroom, then finally leave. She never said anything to the worker, which I thought was stupid then, and thinking back, it's even stupider. But we were dumb and young. We waited for my mom to get there around the employee who never said anything to us and was probably confused as hell. We finally saw her car pull up and we raced out to it and told her to drive out there quickly. After telling her what had happened, she told us that we were probably overreacting and he maybe thought that we were cute and that we were the ones who misunderstood the situation. I'm still kind of pissed at her for that. Very ignorant of a very knowledgeable and usually understanding woman. But maybe she was trying to comfort us. I don't know. All I know is that man did not have good intentions, and we had every right to be afraid as we were. Just thinking about it gives me the same goosebumps as I had in that theater. I know that if I saw him today, I would know exactly who he is. Stay safe. Always trust your instincts. Even if you think that you're overreacting, they're usually right. I'm a 28-year-old male, and a few months ago, my life was pretty calm and predictable. I work as a software developer, and my days are usually spent coding, attending meetings, and troubleshooting issues. My job can be intense, but I do enjoy challenges. I live alone in a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, and my routine was fairly straightforward. I've always been a bit of a night owl, often staying late at work to finish my projects or catch up on tasks. This means that I usually drive home at around 10 or 11 p.m. The drive is about 15 minutes long, mostly through well-lit but quiet suburban streets. I never really thought much about my commute. It was just part of my daily routine, something that I did without a second thought. But all of that changed one night. One evening, I left work a bit later than usual. It was around 11:30 p.m. when I got into my car and I started the drive home. The streets were mostly empty, and the only sounds were the hum of my engine and the occasional chirping of crickets. I felt the usual post-work fatigue, but I looked forward to unwinding with some TV before bed. As I turned onto a quieter street, I noticed a dark sedan behind me. Nothing unusual, just another late-night driver. I paid it no mind, and I continued on my way. But as I made a few more turns, heading deeper into my neighborhood, I realized that the sedan was still there behind me. It was just following at a steady distance. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe the driver lived nearby or was heading in the same direction as me. But the uneasy feeling in my gut grew stronger with each turn that I made. I decided to test my theory by taking a few detours, turning onto random streets that I didn't usually take. And each time that I looked in my rearview mirror, the dark sedan was there, mirroring my every move. My heart rate picked up. This wasn't just a coincidence. Someone was following me. I knew that I needed to lose the car. I didn't want whoever this was to know where I lived. I remembered the police station that was a few miles away. I don't know why I didn't think of that earlier. If I could just make it there, I knew that I would be safe. So I turned onto a main road and then I headed into the direction of the station. My hands were gripping the steering wheel tightly. As I drove, I saw a police car parked on the side of the road up ahead. I felt a surge of relief and I decided to stop beside it. I pulled over and parked next to the patrol car, hoping that the presence of law enforcement would deter the driver of the dark sedan. The dark sedan slowed down as it approached, and I held my breath, watching to see what it would do. And after a moment, it then sped up and then drove off, disappearing into the night. The police car had scared him off. Well, at least for now. I sat in my car for a few minutes, trying to calm myself down. The police officer in the patrol car noticed me and came over to check if everything was all right. I explained what had happened and I gave a description of the dark sedan. The officer took my information and promised to keep an eye out for the car. He also called it in and told them the direction that the car went off to. I felt a sense of relief, but also frustration. The man in the dark sedan had been scared off, but who knows if he would come back or not. To be honest, I said man, but I really have no idea if it was a man or a woman. But what I do know is that I needed to take extra precautions to ensure my safety. Over the next few weeks, I made a conscious effort to change my routine. I started varying my routes home, taking different streets, and occasionally driving to a friend's house before heading back to my apartment. I also adjusted my work hours, leaving earlier or later to avoid a predictable schedule. I continued to keep a close eye on my surroundings, always checking my mirrors and being aware of any cars that seemed to follow me for too long. Safe to say, I'm not a fan of dark sedans right now. So far, I haven't seen the car again, but I will continue to stay vigilant. Stay safe, everyone. Hello, everyone. This happened all yesterday, and I am still very anxious about the whole situation. Well, I was sitting with my boyfriend and my 4-month-old daughter in the train to Paris. On each side were 4 seats, and my boyfriend and I were sitting on one side, and on the other side there was a man in his 50s. He was acting since the beginning a bit weird, mumbling stuff and so on, but I just ignored him as I was a bit exhausted from the travel. He smiles seeing my daughter and says something in French. He was French. Then, I hear noise, like a noise when someone is taking a picture. I was surprised and I thought that it was the grandma sitting on the other side, near the man taking a picture. So, I let it pass because I know that especially grandmas go crazy when they see babies, and this might be like an innocent picture. But then, my boyfriend who is in front of me tells me that it was the man, and he is visibly uncomfortable. I also started to feel a bit unwell because he was like very creepy. Then, my baby starts crying, and after trying to calm her down, I give her to my boyfriend to also try to find out what she needs. Then, the man just takes another picture of our daughter. My boyfriend confronted him and asked him if he was taking pictures. He said no, but he clearly was. He said that he was calling his sister, but the hand movement wasn't as he was trying to call. He was looking behind the phone turned in the direction of my daughter, and after a few seconds, every time checking the phone and doing it again. He then showed us a random chat as to prove that he didn't do anything. He said if my boyfriend had a problem, then they would talk at the train station in Paris. I asked myself why he didn't show us his gallery with all the pictures. This was strange to me. Then he said that he was just making selfies of himself. Time passes, and he then starts doing it again. At this point, I leave with my daughter and I go to find a person who controls our tickets to ask to change seats and tell them what is happening. They give us some new seats very far away from our old ones. We describe the man and they tell us that they will handle it. But then, we see the man coming and he goes to the toilet that's near us, although he shouldn't have to go that far from his seat. I was scared. It was like he was looking for us and where we were. The ticket collector goes after him and asks him what he is doing there. I don't know what he said, but his gestures were wild. He then goes back to his seat, I guess. But after a while, he comes back and goes near us, This happens like 5 times and I was absolutely terrified now. He had a little purse with him and my imagination went like crazy. The ticket collector went after him every time and asked him if he was looking for something and warned him to stop. At first, he didn't listen, but then we didn't see him anymore. What was he doing? Does someone know what his intentions were? After we arrived at the station, we ran like crazy to catch another train quickly because we were scared that he was still following us. I, a mid-20s female, went to the local grocery store tonight at around 5 p.m. It's winter and it's getting dark by 5 p.m. where I live. I was in an aisle taking my time deciding between the options when this late 20s, early 30s looking guy with light features, glasses, and a scruffy beard comes up right next to me and just stands there. I didn't think much of it or even look at him at first because I figured, whatever, he's just looking too, you know. But then, after a few seconds, I noticed that he wasn't moving or doing anything. He was just standing there. So I looked at him and he was already staring at me. And for a half second, I thought that he might say something to me. So I stood there for a second just looking back at him. He didn't say anything, so I just turned and fast walked away. At this point, I'm thinking, okay, that was weird, but whatever. Probably just an awkward guy who doesn't know how to talk to women. Then, not 30 seconds later, I'm in another aisle and I see him out of the corner of my eye, coming down the aisle I'm in, again, staring right at me. So again, I walked away as fast as I could and just went right to the self-checkout. While I was at the self-checkout, I'm looking over my shoulders the whole time, making sure that he isn't behind me anymore, and he's not. I start walking out of the store, relieved that, once again, I was just being paranoid and I wasn't ever in any real danger. But as I am walking out, I decide to look behind me one more time, and there he is, right freaking behind me. I then notice that he has nothing in his hands, no groceries, and he's heading toward the door right on my heels. Without even thinking, I just stop dead in my tracks. I look right at him again, and he's already looking at me. And then he puts his head down looking at his phone, and then walks past me out the door. He bought nothing from the store. I am so scared at this point that my head is spinning. I don't know what to do. I can see my car because I parked close to the exit, thank goodness. So I call my fiancé and I sprint as fast as I can to my car. I then jump in, lock the doors, and start looking for this guy. And then I see him. He is aimlessly walking around the parking lot through the cars. He is pretty far away from me at this point, and I have my fiancé on the phone, so I'm feeling somewhat safe again. I watched him walk around for another few seconds before I got out of there. I have no idea what this guy was doing or what his motive could have been. Maybe he was just a weird dude who doesn't know how to talk to girls? Or maybe he was a predator with dangerous intentions? Or maybe he thought that I would look easy prey for a robbery. The thing I really can't wrap my head around is the fact that each time that I noticed him, he was already staring at me. He was not discreet at all, and I would think a dangerous predator might be a little more inconspicuous. He also didn't buy anything from the grocery store, which I also couldn't understand. I was in the store about 5 minutes before I noticed him, so I'm sure he didn't follow me in the store. Am I being paranoid? There's a lot that didn't feel right, so I'm having a really hard time trying to rationalize this experience. But it was definitely a creepy encounter. Back when I was 17 years old, I was enjoying my summer break before my senior year of high school. I lived in a small town where nothing much ever happened. My days were mostly spent hanging out with friends, working a part-time job at the local ice cream shop, and lounging by the pool in the backyard. Looking back, those were some of the most peaceful days of my life. But all good things must come to an end. One evening when I was home alone, half paying attention to the TV while scrolling through Instagram, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I usually ignore these kinds of calls, they're usually telemarketers. But because my friend said that he got a new number but hadn't given it to me yet, I decided to answer this one, thinking that it might be him. There was a moment of silence on the other end, followed by a faint, almost whispering voice. I couldn't make out what the other person was saying, and they hung up after a few seconds. I brushed it off as a prank, and I just went back to watching TV. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming, all the same unintelligible muttering from the same unknown number. I started to feel annoyed more than anything. I figured that it was some kind of kid from school messing with me. At first, I just declined the calls, but as they kept coming, the more annoyed I got. As the days went by, the calls became more frequent, sometimes happening several times a day. I would try my best to ignore it, but it was just becoming too overwhelming. At that time, I didn't know you had the option to block or silence unknown numbers. So what I did was just put my phone on silent instead so I don't hear it ring. Only to see multiple missed calls from this unknown number when I opened my phone back up. Sometimes, I would answer the call though, and I would scream at whoever was calling, telling them to fuck off. I didn't know any better at that time or how stupid that could be, but I was young, and I assumed that the person in the other line was just some dumb prank caller trying to get on my nerves. Over time, when I did answer and not scream at the person, I noticed that the voice on the other end started to become clearer. It was a man's voice, and after finally being able to understand him, I learned what he was saying. He talked about me, my personal life, details that no stranger should know. He mentioned my name, my school, and even the color of the shirt that I was wearing. Well, my annoyance and anger turned to fear. Someone was watching me. I had no idea who it was. At that point, I started to get paranoid. Every shadowy corner is a potential hiding place for a stalker. I started going out only when I needed to, in fear of the phone man following me. When I did go out, I became hyper aware of my surroundings. Every time I stepped out of my house, I felt like I was being watched by someone that I couldn't see. And sure enough, this feeling turned out to be true. I started to notice a black car that seemed to be everywhere I went. It was never too close. It was parked a few houses down in the morning, and I also saw it in the parking lot at my job. It was just far enough away that you won't recognize or pay attention to it unless you were a paranoid individual looking for a stalker like me. I wanted to take immediate action, but I told myself that it might just be a coincidence, that I shouldn't jump the gun on the wrong person. My stalker would surely notice that I was looking for him. The calls kept coming, and my desperation grew. The details the caller knew about me were too accurate to ignore, accurate and up-to-date too. He could tell me what color shirt I wore on my way to work, what I ate for lunch, and much, much more. I began to feel like I was living in a nightmare. My safe, quiet town no longer felt like anything other than a hunting ground, and I was the prey in it. I was constantly looking over my shoulder. I also can't figure out why I didn't tell my parents about it. One evening, while I was out with my friends, I received another call. This time, the voice on the other end was angry, accusing me of ignoring them and threatening to come find me. My heart raced. I couldn't understand what was going on. This person was stalking me, calling me, threatening me, and I just couldn't understand why and who they were. I knew, though, that I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. I needed to do something. I went to the police and I reported the calls. They took my statement and said that they would look into it. But without any concrete evidence or a way to trace the calls, there wasn't much that they could do. I had a small sliver of hope when I went to report the guy, but it all slipped away when I heard the cops tell me that they couldn't do anything about it. And all I could think of in that moment was that he knows. He will know. He will know that I went to the cops. I did not sleep that night, nor the following one. A few days later, I was walking home from my part-time job when I saw the black car again. It was parked at the end of the street. I hadn't been sleeping well, and in my sleep-deprived mind, the best idea that I got was to try and confront him. Well, at that time, I didn't know if that was him or not. My desperation and hazy mind convinced me in that moment that it was him, and that I had to confront him to put an end to this. I know, looking back at it now, that was an extremely dangerous and stupid decision to make. But I was young, desperate, and stressed. So, I walked to the car. As I got closer, I noticed the figure sitting inside watching me. My heart pounded in my chest and I felt a surge of adrenaline. But as I approached, the car then sped off, leaving me standing there shaking and confused. Who is this person? Why are they targeting me? I then went home and I locked all the doors and windows. The calls continued, and the threats became more explicit. The caller described my house, my daily routine, and even specific things in my bedroom that were visible through my window. I felt violated and helpless. I kept my windows closed, my curtains closed, and my parents were starting to notice my anxiety. I didn't want to worry them. One night, I received a call that pushed me to my breaking point. The caller said that they were outside my house and described the exact outfit that I was wearing. I ran to the window and I saw the black car parked across the street. I felt a wave of terror and I knew that I couldn't stay there any longer. My parents were not home at that time, so what I did is that I grabbed my keys and I ran out the back door, heading to my friend Sarah's house a few blocks away. I looked over my shoulder the whole way, half expecting the car to follow me. When I arrived, I broke down in tears and told Sarah everything. She convinced me to go back to the police again and tell them about the latest threats, and to also tell them about this black car that I keep seeing. This time, the police took immediate action. They sent a patrol car to my house and promised to keep an eye on the neighborhood. I felt a small sense of relief, but he's still out there, and he can still get to me if he wants to. So I just stayed at my friend Sarah's house that night because I was afraid to go back home. The next day, the police called me with some news. They had found the black car parked near my house and questioned the driver. He was a middle-aged man with a history of stalking and harassment. Upon taking his phone for evidence, they noted multiple calls to my number as well as a rope and a pair of handcuffs in his car. He was arrested and charged for stalking, harassment, and plots of kidnapping. Hearing this news, I felt a wave of relief come over me. It's as if all the energy and adrenaline in my body immediately stopped and I buckled to my knees, and as much as I hate to admit it, I cried. I cried so hard. The entirety of the events were playing in my mind, and my friends comforted me, telling me that it was over. I went back home, but the experience had left a mark on me. When my parents came home from their trip, I then told them everything that had happened, and they were extremely sad that I had to face this all alone. They had a stern talk to me about being more open and asking for help from them, because they said that they were my parents and that they will always be there to support me and protect me. We took extra precautions to ensure my safety. We had cameras set up around the house, and they also made sure that I was never alone going to and from work. Over time, the fear began to fade, but I was still feeling uncomfortable whenever I went out because I always felt that I had to be on guard. So I went into therapy, and I'm still in the process of it. My friends and family are there to support me every step of the way. So, the only thing I got from this experience is that whenever something is wrong or something makes you uncomfortable, don't be scared to speak up. Ask for help. Tell your parents, tell your friends. And to that sick man who stalked me, wherever you are, I do hope you're in prison. Let's not meet ever again. I'm a female, and this happened many years ago when I was 15. I live in a small Midwestern town that had very little crime, and I always felt safe even at night. I lived just a few blocks from downtown, and I would often walk or ride my bike there to pick up a soda, some candy, or on this particular evening, a pack of cigarettes. I know, I was way too young to be smoking, but there it is. So I get my cigs and I start walking back home. By this time, it was starting to get dark out, but that doesn't bother me at all. That is, until I pass a cross street and a guy steps out from the shadows and then starts following me. Even then, I wasn't scared. I was just aware that he was walking behind me and was getting closer. I sped up a little and so did he. Pretty soon, this guy is like 3 or 4 steps behind me, and then he asked me for a cigarette. Being a dumb kid who was raised to be polite, I gave him one. And then he asked for a light and I gave him that too. Then, I rapidly start walking away because this guy is starting to give me the creeps. He had long, greasy hair, and the way that he looked at me made me feel very uncomfortable. It was like he was looking at his dinner plate and was deciding what to eat first. So, I'm skedaddling up the street, which is now going up a big hill, where I hear the guy's footsteps starting to run towards me. I was already slightly out of breath from fast walking up this hill, and I know I'll never be able to outrun this guy. So I just keep on walking and hope that this guy will jog right past me. Well, nope. Next thing I know, the guy has grabbed me from behind with one arm around my waist, pinning both arms to my sides and the other around my neck. At this point, I wasn't even scared. I was mad. How dare he? I realize that we are on a residential street, so I tell the guy that I am going to start screaming my head off while I begin stomping on his feet as hard as I could. He hesitates for a moment, then lets me go and then jogs further up the hill, disappearing behind a bush at the top of the hill. I cross the street to walk on the opposite side of the bushes that he went behind, and I keep my eyes locked on those bushes all the way down the block. By now, I am only another block from home, and I break into a sprint and then dash home. Of course, I never told my parents about what happened because I was afraid of getting in trouble for smoking and that they wouldn't believe me. Turns out that several weeks later, this guy grabbed another girl and then beat and raped her. I didn't find this out until years later when I saw his picture in the paper for being on trial for rape. I think I was his first attempt, and he got scared when I fought back. I am so grateful that it was the fight response that kicked in for me that night, and it wasn't the freeze response. I was a very, very lucky kid. Before I start, I must say that I haven't told many people this. mostly because it was a very scary experience for me. This happened in Kelowna, Canada in the 80s. I was about 14 at that time, and I was babysitting at a neighbor's house while the parents were gone. They had a nice house, like most in the neighborhood, and it was right on the corner where two streets connected. My house was right outside a bus stop across from theirs. This happened pretty late at night in the winter, so it was dark out, maybe 11 or 12 at night. I was sitting on the couch when I thought I saw something out the back door. It was one of those glass doors that led to a porch. It was weird though because I couldn't see much. You know when the lights are on and it's dark out, so you can't see anything but black and your reflection? That's what I saw. But I could have sworn that it looked like something was there. So I got up and I walked close to the window. It definitely looked like something was there, but I couldn't see what it was. I got closer and I still couldn't see it. I honestly should have just turned on the lights, but instead, I put my face right to the glass and I cupped my hands by my eyes to look out. Maybe about 1 inch from my face on the other side of the glass was a man. He looked tall and pale from what I could see, and he was staring at me very scarily. Keep in mind, he would have been watching from the backyard. And naturally, I jumped back and I let out a short scream. And being stupid teenage me, I didn't call the cops. I called my parents instead. My father then came over to take a look. There were still footprints in the front and backyard, and I don't remember much after that because it just felt like a very unreal experience. You never expect this stuff to happen to you until it does. Anyways, I just hope that you enjoyed this story because I sure didn't enjoy experiencing it. Hi there. So this was something that happened to me when I was traveling alone. I had lost my partner of 8 years after a long battle with an illness that they had, which caused me to take some time off to try and heal and find myself again. I decided that during the spring break, I would move from Mass back to my home state of Oklahoma to be close to my mother again. On my way there, I made some planned stops at places that my partner and I enjoyed or were memorable for us as a way to honor them. One of those places was a state park. We were both avid outdoorsy people and we loved camping, hiking, and just being one with the nature. And this particular park had strong memories, so I knew that I had to go. Once I got there, I called my mom to let her know that I was there. I then stuffed my phone and keys in my backpack, and then I marched on. The sight was beautiful, especially early mornings in spring, when you could still see the dew sitting on top of the grass and kind of hanging above the rocks. I was able to just take in the sights and let anything out that I needed. A woman I was passing actually snapped a great picture of me by an overhang that I still have to this day. I saw a few people on my hike that were all willing to share their stories and wished me well on my journey. It truly was a therapeutic experience for me. I was and always will be a very giving person and willing to help those in need that I come across too. So when I made eye contact with a man that seemed a bit distraught or maybe just overwhelmed, I stopped and asked if he was okay. When I approached him sitting on the edge of this cliff with his feet dangling, I noticed a very strong alcoholic smell. He said he was fine but just asked if I had water. I always carried an extra bottle, so I just gave him the whole thing, telling him to keep it. If that man was out there drinking, he was going to need the water. I don't know how many people would have stopped for him, let alone give him water, so I did. He thanked me, and we had a small conversation. He told me he used to go there with his parents when he was younger, and that he was just struggling at that time. I don't want to make it too mushy, but I tried my best at a small inspirational speech for him, to which he seemed to cheer up a bit. He then asked me if I was single or if I wanted to go get drinks, to which I politely declined. I didn't want to bring up my partner, but I just said that I wasn't looking for anyone at that time. He shrugged it off and seemed to handle it well by laughing. We then shook hands and wished each other well, and I carried on my path. At one point, I stopped at a small stream and splashed some water on my face and rested. And while sitting there, I started getting a feeling like I was being watched. This was a bit off the path, so I rarely saw people over there. I looked around and I confirmed that no one was around, so I assumed that it was either just me or maybe there was an animal. I was, after all, in their territory, so I decided that it would be best to move along. I got back to the path, and after a bit, that following feeling came back. I again looked behind me and I didn't see anyone, but the feeling just wouldn't go away. My instincts were starting to kick in and overwhelm me, so I sporadically made the decision to break into a run to see what would happen. It was probably a stupid idea if it was an animal, but I really just wanted the feeling to go away. And after a bit, I slowed down to catch my breath and I again looked around. I was not seeing anyone, but this time, I heard heavy breathing. That path is not easy if you don't take steep inclines like that on a regular basis. So, I looked around a little closer and walked back towards a large boulder. On the other side was the same guy that I saw earlier. When I saw him, I didn't know what to do other than ask if he was okay again. He again chuckled and said yes, but seemed like he meant it more this time. I asked him if he was following me in a joking manner, to which he replied that he wasn't intentionally, but just wanted to catch up to me to thank me again because it meant a lot to him. I told him that it was no big deal at all and I was glad to help. And after some awkward standing around, I then said that I had to get going. He waved me on and I headed out thinking that it was a bit awkward, but at least that was solved and over with. But as I made my way to a part the loops around, I started getting the same feeling of being watched. I was a bit less worried this time, expecting it to be the same guy again, but saying that I was a bit annoyed sounds too harsh, but I'm not sure how else to put it. I wanted this experience to release any emotions that I had been holding back. Yeah, I had stopped and talked to a few people, but I wasn't really here to meet new people. I wanted to be able to continue this journey on my own. I continued on this time, thinking maybe if I didn't stop to pay attention to him, then I wouldn't have any more run-ins. Yet, because this circled around, we ended up walking towards each other. This time, I just smiled at him and I tried to keep walking. But I was startled when he grabbed my arm. I never experienced anything like this, so I didn't know what to do but look at him. He told me again that what I said really meant a lot to him and he wanted to make it up to me. I told him that it wasn't necessary as I was just being nice. I tried pulling my arm away as I said this, but he only held it tighter. I started becoming a bit scared for obvious reasons, and he picked up on this as he looked at me, smiled, and asked, "Are you scared?" That made me sick to my stomach. There was no one else around in this secluded area but us. What was he planning? Why would he even say something like that? While choking back tears, I managed to just say please let go of my arm. After a few more seconds of staring at me and smiling, he finally let go and started laughing. I didn't waste any more time and I quickly ran. I was familiar with the path and I knew that I still had a bit to go before I got back to the entrance. But I remembered that there was a small opening in the trees to a field with a few benches where families typically stopped and then took pictures or had lunch. I was praying that I would run into some people and that hopefully I would be able to just walk near them so I wasn't alone. And thankfully I did come across the spot, and there were a few people there. I tried to calm down and look like I was just there to rest, as I didn't want anyone to be worried about me. I sat up at the bench and I looked around worried that he would show up and then cause another scene, but thankfully he never did. After some time, I was able to calm down and try to enjoy the last bit of my trek. I was obviously upset. This was supposed to be a time for me to heal and then move on with my life. And while this was pretty terrifying, I refused to let this ruin it for me. I gathered myself and I headed back to the entrance by myself. I started a brisk walk until I was back into my jog, until I finally reached the entrance. I stopped by the restrooms to freshen up before I was ready to head back to my car. But as I exited the restroom, I, of course, would make eye contact with this same guy heading into the shop. But he looked slightly different. He had lost the old dirty jacket that he was wearing, and the jeans he was wearing now looked like it had been cut at the knees. Could he have changed into them? Quite possibly, but since they seemed jagged and uneven, they looked intentionally and sporadically cut. And of course, as soon as he noticed me, he stopped and turned like he was about to walk towards me. This time, I wasn't going to be the scared little girl. I rolled my eyes and I immediately turned around to walk to my car with my keys clenched between my fingers, and I heard someone shout, "Hey!" from behind me, but I didn't stop. I didn't even turn around until I heard the footsteps getting faster, causing me to run as well. I managed to get to my car, get in, lock it as he finally caught up and started pulling on my car handle. When he realized that it was locked, he became enraged. He kept screaming to open the door and he was banging on my window and kicking it. It didn't last long before a ranger noticed and came rushing up to us as well, but he then took off. They didn't catch him, but he did stupidly run backwards into the park, so he would have to leave eventually. The ranger asked me what happened and I agreed to stay to tell an officer. Throughout this whole time, they never found the guy, so I ended up leaving and giving them my contact information if they had any other questions for me. I left there, relieved for multiple reasons. Relieved that I would never see that man again, but also relieved that I made it through the trail alone for the first time. It felt like a weight being lifted off me, like I was being tested and I passed it, and it would just make me stronger. I even got a call from the officer telling me that they did catch the guy, and since the rangers saw him, I didn't have to come back to identify him. They also told me that he had warrants, so he went back with them anyway. Overall, I felt like the trip was successful, and I was already feeling better. I'm not going to say it made me more suspicious of people, as I still look for the best in others, but I am also mentally stronger and know how to handle situations better, both physically and mentally. And to the guy that stalked me that day, I hope that you are truly doing better. Yesterday, I was at the mall around closing time. I was browsing for some cosmetic products in the makeup aisle with my friend until I realized that there was this one strange man who had like a mischievous ass look on his face, whom kept walking past the same aisle that I was in. 5 to 6 different times, he was staring at us every single time. I don't think anything of it yet besides a weird vibe, and me and my friend tried to test something out by going into a whole different section of the store. When we went to where the birthday cards were, I saw him in the corner of my eye, so I told my friend to keep walking. We then reached the other end of the store where the pet supplies are, and he was still there. There, cornering the main entrance of the aisle. At that point, I whispered to my friend and we immediately speed walked out. And when we did, I still saw him following us, so I turned around to speak up, but when I did, he was just staring at me. I didn't break eye contact because I wanted to say something to this man, but my mind went blank. Once we reached the checkout, and I see he's waiting right behind us, but not quite at the checkout. He was behind and beside the entrance of the checkout. At this point, my friend noticed and I was about to freak the fuck out. We stood there for around 15 to 20 minutes waiting to see if he would leave, and he never did. So, after that time markup was up, we decided to just hold hands and then run up the escalators and make our way to the upper level exit. We both were running for our dear lives, but once I went through the gate in front of the exit, my friend immediately grabbed me back and I didn't realize why. Until seeing the guy had somehow got into the door before us, which had to have been impossible because we ran before he did. We never even saw him running or heard anyone running. However, we did get escorted out by an older group of men and women who overheard me and my friend freaking out about the situation. They confronted him, but I never got to hear anything any of them said. He asked the group of people, "Are you sure you guys are with these people?" And after they confirmed, he left, and someone a part of the group said something about him allegedly lying about being some sort of undercover employee. So, I've been listening to scary story channels for ages, and I've always been a skeptical believer in all the stories. I feel like some of them are certainly fiction, but others sound more true than others. But I've always looked at them all as probably made up. But that changed recently because I had something happen to me that I would have listened to and immediately thought that it was fiction. It's not super eventful, it's actually pretty straightforward, but it was seriously weird and is legitimately the stuff of nightmares. It was a regular Wednesday night to begin with, and I had woken up somewhere around 3 to what I would say was the most annoying feeling in the back of my throat. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night with your throat feeling like the Sahara and you absolutely have to go downstairs and down half a gallon of water? Yeah, it was one of those nights. It was my own fault though. I had eaten a whole bag of pretzels and I knew that the amount of sodium that I had consumed was probably close to fatal. I grumbled to myself, not wanting to leave the comfort of my bed. But after a few minutes of trying to ignore it and go back to sleep, I sighed and I relented. I stumbled my way down the stairs in the dark, nearly eating the hardwood floor in the hallway at the bottom. I made my way to the kitchen and grabbed a glass from the cabinet and then walked over the sink. Now, like a lot of kitchens, there's a big window over it that faces out in the backyard, and at night, it's pretty much pitch black. There's a small light on the shed that's on the far left side, but that's about it. Normally, I wouldn't even bother looking out back, or would and wouldn't think twice about seeing nothing. But this time, something actually did catch my eye. Right there, in the middle of my backyard was a figure. Well, not a figure like something I couldn't make out. It was a person, just standing there. Seeing someone in my yard was enough to startle me in and of itself. But the creepiest part was that this person was wearing a mask. This mask was terrifying. It had a weird twisted jaw with spiked teeth that was stretched out, and the eyes were hollow and dark, And really, it was just terrifying. Now, my brain made me stand there and just kind of stare at this person wearing a weird mask that was just standing in my backyard for several moments. At first, I thought that I was hallucinating or dreaming, or that I was just seeing something else and only thinking that it was a person with a mask. But as I sipped my water, watching this person watching me, my mind finally clicked into drive and I realized that I was staring at a person wearing a creepy mask standing in my backyard. Like, this was not a normal thing to see at 3 in the morning. I started freaking out at this point and I dashed back up the stairs to put on my pants and grab my phone on my way down. I had 911 already dialed and I ran back to my window. But I was surprised to see that the person was gone. The backyard was back to being empty and there was zero trace of this masked person. I already dialed 911 at this point, and the operator was asking me where the emergency was, and I didn't want to just say, "Oh, never mind, I'm just crazy." So I explained to her that I saw a person in a mask in my backyard, but that they seemed to have left. She was a bit confused, but I explained that I saw them, and when I went to grab my phone, they had disappeared. And after explaining things like the idiot that I am, she reassured me that they would send a unit to drive around the neighborhood. After I got off the phone with her, I stayed downstairs and I just kind of watched out the front window, feeling paranoid and creeped out. After a while, the police had pulled up to my house and knocked on my door, and I opened it to speak with them. The officer asked me a few questions, mostly about what I saw. I explained to him the guy with the mask, and I described what they were wearing to the best of my abilities. I could tell by the look on the officer's face that he was as confused as I was, and he even said that it was really strange, and then asked if it was okay that they look around on my property. I told them that I had no issue with that. After a few minutes, they had actually come back to the door, and the officer asked me if my gate had been broken, and I looked at him like, "Huh?" He motioned for me to come out, and sure enough, my gate was busted. The fence was wooden and the gate was fairly large, and the latch had been completely pulled from the wood, like pried out with a crowbar or something. I told him that no, that it wasn't broken like that before. And he then told me to stay there while he checked the backyard out real quick, just in case. They looked around for a few moments, and when he came back, he asked me if what he'd found was the mask that I had seen. It was. It was that same creepy-ass mask that the person was wearing. After that, they seemed to take this a bit more seriously and asked me if they could come in and if I could give them an official statement. They then came in, took my statement, and they gave me the report information for the insurance company since the gate was destroyed, and then they left, telling me to call them again if I saw anything else. I have no idea if they ever found anything past this, as they never contacted me about it. A couple of days have passed and I kind of relaxed about what had happened. Until one day when I came home from work, and I saw a crumpled piece of paper in front of my door. It was just a normal-looking paper crumpled, nothing too old or creepy. So I decided to open it up, and on that paper was a single line that drained all the blood from my face. It said, "I'm always watching you." I know that this sounds like some creepy event from some dumb B-rated horror movie, and I would have had that same thought had I read or heard the story. But I lived it. I did contact the police and gave them the note, but nothing further has happened since. What did happen was enough to be terrifying to me though. I was paranoid, and I would watch the backyard sometimes an entire night. Now, when I go to bed, I double-check all the locks, and the gate that I had installed is reinforced way better than the old one. I have no idea how they pried the gate open or why they did it, but they did. I also don't know what they meant about the sentence that they wrote on the paper. Are they pranking me? Do I have a stalker? Is this some kind of sick joke that someone is playing on me? I don't know. But I have also installed a floodlight that is motion activated that shines into the backyard, just in case that I wake up at 3 in the morning again and I feel the need to look outside. My name is Tracy, and I'm 24 years old, and I live in the bustling city of Seattle, Washington. I have always loved the vibrant energy of the city, with its coffee culture and the ever-present drizzle that somehow adds to its charm. My story begins in the place that I find solace in, Starbucks. It was a typical rainy afternoon. I decided to treat myself to a caramel macchiato at the Starbucks on Pike Street. Since I wasn't in a hurry, I grabbed my coffee and I found a cozy seat by the window, just enjoying the ambience and watching people bustle by. As I sipped my coffee, a guy approached me. He looked to be in his late 20s with dark hair, a set of piercing blue eyes, and a chiseled jawline. He wore a well-fitted leather jacket and smelled of subtle masculine cologne. He asked if he could join me, and I couldn't help but be drawn to his charming smile and confident demeanor. Being single and, ready to mingle, I was open to new experiences, so I said yes. His name was Alex, and we immediately hit it off. He was witty, kind, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We exchanged numbers before parting ways. We started texting, and later on, Alex and I started going on dates, and each one felt like a dream. We had picnics at Gasworks Park, enjoying romantic dinners at quaint little restaurants, and we took long walks along the waterfront. He was always attentive, holding open doors for me and making sure that I was comfortable. He had a way of making me feel special, and I soon found myself falling for him. Our dates were filled with laughter and deep conversations. He seemed perfect, the kind of guy that I have always dreamed of. And after a few months, we decided to make things official. Alex became my boyfriend, and for the first 3 months, he was everything that I could ever want. He was sweet, caring, and always made time for me. I felt like the luckiest girl in the world. But after 3 months, things started to change with Alex. He became cold and distant. When we went on dates, he would often ignore me and he's just glued to his phone. Conversations that once flowed so easily became strained and awkward. I tried to brush it off thinking that he might just be stressed with work, but his behavior persisted and it was really hurting me. At the same time, he also became controlling. Ironic, right? Whenever I went out with friends, he would bombard me with calls and texts, accusing me of cheating or lying about my whereabouts. The sweet, attentive guy that I fell for seemed to disappear, replaced by someone that I barely recognize. Yet, after these episodes, he would suddenly shower me with affection, apologizing profusely, giving me flowers, gifts, and then promising to change. But then, after everything is alright, he then goes back to being cold and distant, and then the cycle begins again. I just couldn't get it, like if I was with him, I would get ignored, but when I wasn't with him, he would turn into this controlling, clingy monster. Well, I reached my breaking point and I decided to end the relationship. Alex couldn't understand what he did wrong though. He became angry during the breakup. He was screaming and he was throwing things around my apartment. I had never seen him so enraged. He broke the picture frame and knocked over a lamp. Like, what the hell? This was a side to him that I was never expecting at all. A good thing that he was showing it this early, though. But at that moment, I was extremely terrified, so I called the police. The police then arrived and managed to calm him down, and then they escorted him out of my apartment. Things were silent for a week, and I hoped that that was the end of it. All that I had to do right now was to move on and let go of him. But guess what? I was wrong. Alex showed up at my door with flowers, asking me to take him back. I explained that it was over and that I couldn't continue in a relationship that made me feel unsafe. He threw the flowers on the ground and just stormed out, and I thought that that would be the last that I would see of him. And you know what? I was wrong again. Alex began stalking me. He called and texted me constantly, begging for another chance, and then turning angry when I didn't respond. I started seeing his car parked near my apartment, and he would follow me to work and other places I frequented. I was hanging out with friends once, and we saw him sitting and drinking at another table all by himself, just staring at me. This guy that I once fell in love with was seriously freaking me out. One night, I was walking home from the grocery store when I noticed him trailing behind me. My heart pounded with fear as I quickened my pace. I was so desperate to get home and just to get away from him. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I was constantly looking over my shoulder and feeling unsafe in my own city. The situation reached its climax though one night when I was asleep. I woke up to the sound of banging on my door. I checked the time, and it was 2 a.m. It was Alex outside. He was shouting and he was demanding to be let in. He said that he just wanted to talk, but I was terrified. So I grabbed my phone ready to call the police when I saw red and blue lights flashing through the window. The police arrived, and it turned out that my neighbors had called them after hearing the disturbance. They took Alex away and I filed a police report. The ordeal left me shaken, but I was grateful for my neighbors and the swift response of the police. In the aftermath, I had to file a restraining order against him. I also took more steps to protect myself. I changed my phone number, I installed security cameras, and I took self-defense classes. If I had ignored the red flags in my relationship, things could have ended much, much worse. So, yeah, that's my story. My encounter with a charming stranger turned stalker taught me a valuable lesson about trust, safety, and resilience. I hope my experience serves as a cautionary tale and offers some comfort to others who might be going through similar situations. Please stay safe and always trust your instincts. This happened about 3 years ago. So, I was 16 at that time. I remember it being a warm day, sometime in September. I was off work that day, and I decided to go hang out with my best friend. We'll call her Abby. I had just gotten my license in the spring of that year, so I was pretty excited to be driving around town. I got to Abby's house and we were trying to figure out something that we could do. We decided that we didn't want to go out with friends and instead make dinner for Abby's mom and stepdad. So, we got in the car and headed to Walmart to grab some ingredients for dinner and grab some cake mix on the way out. While we were there, we noticed there was a guy, maybe mid-50s, that we were constantly walking past over and over again in the store. But we didn't pay it much mind since it was pretty busy in their aisles. We checked out and then we started heading over to my car when we noticed that same guy packing his groceries into his trunk. I remember looking over at Abby and saying something along the lines of, "Oh, Is that your new boyfriend? Or, why don't you go get his number? We both laugh, maybe a little too loud, because it caught the dude's attention as we were walking by him. He looked back at us, and we both knew that we messed up by being loud. He turns around and tells us our hair is beautiful and asks us if we were sisters. We told him we were, thanked him for his compliment, and then told him to have a good day. Honestly, in our part of town, it's quite common for dudes to compliment whatever girls they see, so we were used to it and we just brushed it off. We got into the car, and I obviously locked the doors, and we start laughing about the guy, talking about how creepy his eyes looked. Now, looks like the guy was watching Abby and I walk to my car, I'm guessing, because he ended up driving the opposite way of the exit to drive slowly behind my car. I saw his face looking at my car in my rearview mirror. I looked at Abby and then I went, "Holy shit, it's the same creep earlier." We then broke out in laughter, making fun of him once again. He had already driven off by this point, so we do too. We then get home, make food, and have a good night and sleep. Normal days go by and I forget about the situation. Until one day at work, I'm running food from table to table, helping out the servers at my job, and I bring food to a table who look particularly surprised to see my face. I didn't recognize the guy at first, until I saw his eyes, and I realized who the hell I was talking to. I place the food down, ask if he needs anything, and then I scurry off to the bathroom to tell Abby what just happened. "Hey, Abby, the dude from Walmart last week is sitting in the restaurant right now, and I just ran food to him." Hours go by, and he's still sitting at the bar cranking back beers alone. I told my coworkers about the dude and they were like, "Well, he's probably just lonely." My manager tells me to go home since it's low, so I clock out and leave. As I'm walking to my car, I hear the restaurant door swing open and there he is, trailing behind me, telling me to talk to him. I stop, turn around, and then he says, "So, does a pretty lady like you have a boyfriend?" I tell him that I do, and that my boyfriend works with me, which was definitely a lie. He then proceeds to get closer to the point where I can smell the alcohol in his breath. His eyes get big and then he says, "Would you mind if me and you became friends?" At this time, I was totally creeped out and I told the guy that I was 16, hoping that he would back off after hearing my age. Unfortunately, I think all that did was make him more interested. I tell him that I need to go and that it was nice to meet him, and then I walk away. I can still hear him murmuring under his breath. The guy was really drunk, and he watched me get into my car and then drive away. I was totally freaked out by the guy and ended up telling Abby over the phone and telling my mom once I got home. She told me to keep my eyes open from now on because this guy was obviously interested in underage girls and doesn't care where he is when he finds a girl he likes. A week passes, and I go to work again and there he is, sitting at the bar, throwing back beers again. I tell my manager that I am not running food to this particular area and tell her my background with the guy. She understands and then sends me to work on the register. I see the guy waltz over to the restroom and then slam the door open so loud that the whole restaurant looks over and then goes silent. He looks back at the silence that he created and then sees me once again. I was so over this guy, I didn't even care. I just walked over to the kitchen to hide by the cooks. The guy then heads back to the bar after his bathroom performance and then orders food. 10 minutes pass by and the local police come in asking my manager to see last Saturday's camera footage. She walks into the office with the cops and all the staff is pretty confused. About 40 minutes later, The cops walk over to the bar and then arrest the same old creep. I watched in glee as that sucker was getting put in handcuffs. I ran over to my manager and asked her what happened. Apparently, the guy was under investigation for spiking a young woman's drink at my restaurant, and the cameras caught him red-handed after the woman filed the police report the next morning. I haven't seen this guy since, except in my nightmares. Hopefully, he's still rotting in jail somewhere, getting some help from his weird fetishes. Anyways, ladies, always be on the lookout for each other. For 4 years, Beverly and I had what I believed was an ideal relationship. I remember our first meeting vividly, as if it just happened yesterday. We met through mutual friends at a small party. She was 26 and full of life, with a laugh that could light up the room. I was 28, feeling like I had finally found someone who understood me. We clicked instantly, and our relationship blossomed quickly from innocent dates to talking about our future together. Beverly and I were good for each other. We encouraged each other to pursue our dreams, to stay healthy, to be the best versions of ourselves. She would cook my favorite meals when I had a tough day at work, and I would surprise her with little gifts and spontaneous trips. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we always found our way back to each other. Or so I thought. One Saturday morning, I was in the living room while Beverly was in the shower. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, and without thinking much of it, I glanced over. A message notification popped up from someone named Gym Instructor. It wasn't the name that caught my attention, but the content of the message. It was flirty, suggestive, something that a gym instructor shouldn't be sending if it were simply professional. My heart sank. It never even crossed my mind that something like this could be happening behind my back. I was heartbroken. I confronted Beverly that same day when she got out of the shower. At first, she denied everything, claiming that it was just a misunderstanding. But as the argument escalated, she finally confessed. She had been cheating on me for months. This betrayal really cut deep. Our breakup was nasty. It was filled with angry words and broken promises, and I moved out that very week and cut all contact with her. It was actually easier than I thought, severing ties with someone who had caused me so much pain. That was definitely a painful experience, but that's not why I'm posting the story on here. It's something more unhinged that happened afterwards, but I thought that I would give you a background first so you would understand the story better. A year passed, and I started to rebuild my life. I met a girl named Jenny, and she was a breath of fresh air. We hit it off from the start and soon began going on dates. I didn't want to jump right into a relationship because I feel like I still had some doubts and trauma, especially from what happened with Beverly. But Jenny was everything that I needed. She was kind, loving, and honest. Our relationship felt so natural that after a few months of going out on dates, I finally asked her, and she said yes. We decided to make it official. So, I posted a picture of us together on social media, announcing to the world that I had moved on and found happiness again. Perfect ending, right? Nope. The very next day, Beverly sent me a message on Instagram. She berated me for moving on so quickly, as if she had any right to control my life. I was furious, and I reminded her of the reasons for our breakup. It had been a year since we ended things because she had cheated on me. I told her that she had no right to interfere in my life anymore, and then I blocked her. I thought that that would be the end of it, but Beverly was relentless. She tried to contact me in different social medias and I blocked her on there too. She then started creating multiple fake social media accounts just to get in contact with me, and every single time I blocked her, thinking that she would eventually get the message and just leave me alone. She also sent me an email, which something that I forgot about, and I blocked her on there too. One evening, Jenny received a message from Beverly. She was confused and worried when she told me about it. I do understand that it was easy for Beverly to find Jenny online because she was all over on my page. I explained my past with Beverly and what has been going on recently. I didn't want to keep Jenny in the dark. We agreed to block Beverly from all social media platforms and hoped that that would be the end of her attempts to reach out to us. We just wanted to focus on our relationship without any distractions from my past. But as you already know, Beverly didn't stop there. The next day, she showed up at my workplace demanding to speak with me. I refused to see her, and she was eventually escorted out. It was so unsettling to think that she knew where I worked and was willing to come there uninvited. From that point on, I started seeing her everywhere. She would appear across the street when I was out with Jenny, or I would catch a glimpse of her at the grocery store. It felt like she was haunting me, just unwilling to let go. One day, I found a letter in my mailbox. Of course, it was from Beverly, filled with pleas for a second chance and all her declarations of love for me. I didn't respond and I just threw it away. But things escalated when one night, there was a loud banging on my door. I looked through the peephole and I saw Beverly standing there. She looked disheveled and desperate, asking to be let in. I spoke to her through the door, telling her that nothing would change if we talked, and that I did not love her anymore and that we had been done for a year. I told her that she needed to move on, and that I would call the police if she didn't leave. Beverly pleaded for a second chance, but I was firm. I told her that if she ever bothered me or Jenny again, we would involve the police. Luckily, that finally made her leave. I watched through the window as she walked away, hoping that it would be the last time that I would see her. A week has passed since that night, and Beverly hasn't shown herself or tried contacting me. I hope it really stays that way. I want to move on with my life, to build something meaningful with Jenny without the shadow of Beverly hanging over us. It's strange how someone who once made you feel so loved can become the source of your nightmares. Let this be a reminder to everyone. If someone shows you who they truly are, believe them the first time. It could save you from a lot of pain and turmoil. Beverly may have been a significant part of my past, but she has no place in my future. I hope for her sake and mine that she learns to let go and finds peace. Sometimes, moving on isn't just about finding a new love. It's about reclaiming your life from the ghosts of the past. And I've learned that the hard way. And I sincerely hope that we never meet again, Beverly. My name is Joanna, and I'm a 24-year-old single mother to an amazing 8-year-old boy named Jonathan. Life isn't always easy as a single parent, but Jonathan's joy and laughter makes every challenge worth it. One tradition we've kept over the years is going to the annual Carnival that sets up in our area. It's a day we both look forward to. It would be filled with laughter, rides, and sweet treats. This year was no different. Jonathan had been talking about it for weeks, and when the day finally arrived, his excitement was infectious. The carnival was just as bright and lively as we remembered. The air was filled with a tantalizing smell of popcorn, cotton candy, and hot dogs. There were colorful lights blinking and flashing. They were lighting up the night sky. We could hear the joyful screams of people enjoying the rides and the sounds of carnival games calling out to us. There were countless things to do. Rides like Ferris wheel and bumper cars, game booths where you could win oversized stuffed animals, and food stalls offering everything from funnel cakes to corn dogs. Jonathan and I spent hours exploring the carnival. We went on the merry-go-round, tried our luck at the ring toss, and devoured a giant pretzel together. Eventually, we decided to take a short break. I found a bench for Jonathan to sit on while I went to get us some cotton candy. The stall was just a few steps away from the bench, and I could see him the whole time, so I felt that it was safe. As I was finishing up my purchase, my attention was drawn to a man talking to Jonathan. He had disheveled hair, looked around 6 feet tall, and seemed to be in his late 50s. My heart skipped a beat when I saw him offering Jonathan a lollipop. I quickly grabbed my change and I rushed over. I told the man no thank you and that we were fine, and I took Jonathan away from there. The man gave me an unsettling look, but I just brushed it off. I didn't want to ruin our day over a creepy encounter. Jonathan and I continued our fun at the carnival. We went on more rides, played more games, and indulged in more snacks. I think I was starting to get a tummy ache from it. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, and I just focused on making happy memories with my son. While I was trying to take a photo of my son, I noticed the same man in the background. I told myself that it was just a coincidence, and I continued taking pictures. But as we moved around the carnival, I kept seeing him. Every time that I looked up, he seemed to be there, lurking in the distance, watching us. A chill ran down my spine. I began to feel like this man, he's stalking us, he's following us. Not us specifically, but Jonathan. I decided that it was time to leave. My son was getting tired anyway, so I told him that we were heading home. We walked swiftly towards the parking area, and as we neared our car, I heard footsteps behind us. My heart pounded in my chest, and as I turned to see the same man following us, panic surged through me. I picked up my son and I ran as fast as I could. There was enough distance between us and the man, so I was able to reach my car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands were trembling, but I managed to unlock the doors, get Jonathan inside, and then get in myself, and then I locked them again. I started the car and I sped out of there, my eyes constantly darting to the rearview mirror, expecting to see the man following us. The drive home was nerve-wracking. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even though I saw no sign of the man behind us. Every car that appeared in the rear-view mirror sent a surge of anxiety through me. But eventually, we made it home safely. I locked all the doors and windows, and only then did I begin to relax. It's been almost a year since that terrifying day at the carnival, and the event is coming back soon. Jonathan has been buzzing with excitement, already making plans for what rides he wants to go on and what games he wants to play. But this time, I'm not so sure if we'll be going. The memory of that man, his disheveled hair, the way he watched us, the way he was just so obsessed with my son, it haunts me. I was never able to report the incident to the police. I thought maybe I was just overreacting, that it was just my motherly instincts in overdrive. But the fear I felt that day, the panic, and the need to protect my son at all cost is something that I can never forget. I am torn between giving Jonathan the fun-filled day that he's been looking forward to and ensuring his safety above all else. I've started to think about alternative plans, other ways to create special memories without putting us at risk. Maybe I'll explain to Jonathan what we need to be careful of, that sometimes it's okay to break traditions if it means staying safe. I hope that sharing the story serves as a reminder to other parents out there to always trust your instincts and never ignore when something feels off. I am just grateful that Jonathan and I made it home safely that day. I hope no one else has to go through a similar ordeal. So, to the stranger from the carnival, let's never, ever meet again. And with my situation with Jonathan, I would appreciate any suggestions if you may have them. Last June, some girlfriends and I had decided to go on a trip to Chicago for a music festival. My brother lives about 20 minutes out of Chicago but works in the city. For one of the days, we had rode the train in with him, and then he went to work and we just floundered the city touring until he was done. Around midday, we decided to go to his workplace and visit him as he worked in one of the buildings a couple blocks from the Chicago Bean. When we got into the building, we got to the second floor and we were greeted by some front desk ladies. We stood there texting my brother to come down, and we were met with him showing him pictures of our touring trip so far. I then noticed the man coming up the escalator, and I instantly had a very odd feeling from him. Not to be stereotyped, but I had got the vibe he either was not fully there or maybe was on some type of substance. Instantly, the front desk ladies had approached him and told him, "You know you can't be up here. We told you this, sir." Clearly, this wasn't their first rodeo with this guy. I tried to focus on my brother talking to us, but I couldn't help but notice this guy was locked in staring at us while these ladies were trying to escort him out. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed he just stood there looking at us. Eyes literally looked black and his arms crossed, not saying anything. My friend standing at the other end of our group immediately caught on as well and audibly said, "Hey, we should go like right now." Her noticing this as well creeped me out because I thought that I was just being dramatic. We quickly went down the opposite side of the building, and my other two friends were confused and did not pick up what me and my friend were talking about. I told them that I would explain once we got out of the building. We began walking down the sidewalk, and I explained to my other two friends what I had felt from this guy. I glanced over panicked that we might have been followed. And sure enough, on the opposite side of the road on the sidewalk, he walked with his arms crossed, head slightly cocked, dead eyes staring at us walking. I now had full body chills, not because he had given me any reason, but because of his demeanor. I had genuinely felt like he knew that we were afraid and he was feeding off of it. Also, he just had a genuine malicious vibe coming from him. I scrambled to tell my friends of the situation. We started kind of darting between tourists and blocks to lose him. I was freaked out because we come from a small town, Minnesota, and we've seen drug addicts, but this didn't feel like just some random tweaker. He had the scariest vibe, and he was following us. To this day, we all talk about it because it freaked us out so bad. I know it's not a lot of a physical story, but it's so much more of a you had to be there to experience how he actually felt vibe-wise. I always say, Chicago has some very weird energy and people in it. Teaching has always been my passion ever since I was young. There's just something profoundly fulfilling about shaping young minds and helping them understand concepts that once seemed impossible, and then witnessing their aha moments. I teach math at a high school, and despite the challenges, I really love what I do. Over the years, I've had my fair share of struggles. Some students find math boring, some find it too difficult, and the others are simply unmotivated. But I've always believed that with enough encouragement and support, every student can succeed in it. One student, however, really tested my faith in that belief. His name was Dylan. From the start, Dylan was different. He never did his homework, rarely attended classes, and when he did, he was disruptive and unfriendly. He had this permanent scowl etched on his face, and he never talked to anyone unless it was to snap at them. Despite his attitude, I really tried my best to help him. I understood that math could be tough and that he might be going through some personal issues at home. I reached out to him multiple times, offering free extra tutoring sessions, some study guides, and even one-on-one discussions. But it was a one-sided effort. Dylan rejected every attempt that I made to help him. He slacked off, failed his exams, and in the end, I had no choice but to fail him. When Dylan learned about his failing grade, he was absolutely furious. He stormed into my office, yelling and berating me. Despite his anger, I remained calm. I get how he feels. So, I showed him all the proof of my efforts to assist him over the months, the study guides, the notes, the invitations for extra help. But he wasn't having it. He left my office in a rage, slamming the door behind him. The school year ended and summer break began. I tried to put the incident behind me and I focused on some hobbies that I enjoyed, like gardening. Gardening has always been my escape, a way to unwind and connect with nature. But one afternoon, while I was weeding the flower beds, I saw a familiar face biking across the street. It was Dylan. I knew for a fact that he didn't live anywhere near my neighborhood, but I just brushed it off, thinking that maybe he was visiting a friend. However, the way he stared at me gave me an uneasy feeling. The next morning, I came out to find my garden destroyed. The plants were uprooted, the flowers trampled, and the garden tools scattered everywhere. I was absolutely gutted. I had put so much love and effort into that garden. I had a suspicion that it was Dylan, but without proof, what could I do, right? So I just cleaned up the mess with a heavy heart and I tried to move on. Just as I was starting to recover from the garden incident, I found a dead bird on my front doorstep. It was a gruesome sight and it really frightened me. I tried to convince myself that it was just a coincidence, but deep down I knew that it wasn't. The misfortunes continued. Strange things kept happening around the house, broken windows, unsettling occurrences, and through it all, I kept seeing Dylan. He would bike around the neighborhood, always staring, always watching. One morning, I was about to go to the grocery store when I noticed that one of my tires was slashed. That was the last straw. I just couldn't take it anymore. I finally told my husband about everything that had been happening. He was understandably concerned and suggested that we set up security cameras around the house. It seemed like a good idea, so we installed them, hoping to catch whoever was responsible for these acts. For a few days, nothing happened. I started to feel a little more at ease, thinking maybe it was all over. But then one night, I received a notification on my phone about movement outside. I opened the video feed, and I turned pale at what I saw. There, on the screen, was Dylan and another man. This other man looked older, and both of them were walking calmly towards our house. It seemed they were carrying something, and I tried to figure out what it was. And what I saw was a gasoline canister. My heart raced as I realized what they were planning. They reached the side of our garage and started dousing it with gasoline. The other man, who I later learned was Dylan's older brother, pulled out a lighter. And without wasting a second, I called the cops. My hands trembled as I explained the situation. But while I was on the phone, I already heard the sirens from a distance. To my relief, the police arrived so quickly. A neighbor actually had seen the suspicious man and had called the cops even before I did. The officers caught Dylan and his brother just in time. The side of our garage was already soaked in gasoline, and it was clear that they intended to set it on fire. Both of them were arrested. In the aftermath, the pieces of the puzzle started to come together. Dylan had held a grudge against me ever since I failed him. He couldn't accept responsibility for his actions and instead blamed me for his failures. His older brother, already with a criminal background, had decided to help him with his twisted plan. Dylan was sent to juvenile detention for attempted arson, and his brother went to jail. The whole ordeal really left me traumatized. The thought that a student that I had once tried to help could turn into a stalker and attempt to burn my house down was just too much to bear for me. So, I decided to quit teaching. Now, I sell fruits and vegetables from my garden at local markets. It's a simpler life, and it brings me a certain peace that I never thought I'd need. I also do other work on the side to make ends meet. It's not the life that I had envisioned, but it's a safe one, away from the shadow of people like Dylan and the horrors of that summer that I had. I hope this serves as a reminder that sometimes, no matter how much you try to help someone, they can still turn against you. Stay vigilant, trust your instincts, and never ignore the signs of something being wrong. I wish I had acted sooner, but I am grateful that in the end justice was served, and I can now live my life in peace. So, to Dylan, let's not meet again. As I was reading some of the stories in this community, I remember this night from about 8 years ago. It was after 11 p.m., and I was taking my dogs out for their last toileting walk before bed. At that time, I was living in a rural area where the houses are farther apart, lots of wooded lots around with wild pigs often crossing our path. I would often take long walks because one of the dogs had a problem with having accidents in the morning if he hadn't had an adequate walk to do all of his business. It was dark, so I had the flashlight, and I wasn't really expecting to meet anyone. It was in the middle of nowhere and so late at night, but there appeared on the opposite side of the road ahead another flashlight. We had a few neighbors, but of the homes around, I knew most all of them from the years. On rare occasion, someone else may be walking a dog, but I could count the instances on my fingers. As I passed the other flashlight in the night, a tall, thin, pale man who I have never seen before crossed the street to my side and then began to follow me behind. He yelled out, "Hey, I like your dogs. Can I pet them?" I stayed calm, walking briskly, ignoring him. My house was closed and I was almost home. He continued to follow me, yelling, "Hey, what's your name? I just want to pet your dogs." He had a thick European/Slavic accent. I ignored him and I just ran up into my house through the door. I then locked it and I ran to my bedroom. I told my husband that there was a strange man who followed me home and that I was super disturbed that he now knows where I live. My brave husband immediately ran out of the house, I guess to find this guy. I was on pins and needles waiting for him to come back. He then came back home with his steel baseball bat in hand. He said that he caught up to him and asked who the hell he was and why he was following around a woman at basically midnight being a creep. The guy said that he was new to town and he was walking around hoping to meet or make some new friends. Basically, his story was bizarre and didn't make any sense. My husband told him that if he ever sees him again near our home, that he would break his knees with a baseball bat. And I never saw him again after that. Until 2 years later, in a neighboring city, I was out with a girlfriend looking at art in a museum when I turned the corner and it was him. I would never forget his face. He looked straight at me and I can't remember exactly what he said, but he knew who I was from that night. Something like, "Oh, you're the girl from that night with the dogs." I don't remember because I was just in disbelief. Again, with a thick European accent, tall, skinny, pale. I then grabbed my friend's arm and we quickly walked in the opposite direction. She asked me, "Do you know that creepy guy?" And I told her the story as we left the museum, and I never saw him again. What are the odds of this guy being a coincidence? Hi everyone, my name is Gina. I'm a female and also 15 years old, and my family moved to a new place. We have been here for a year now. When we moved to the new house, it really felt like a fresh start for me. After the chaotic year that we had, my family needed it. My dad had switched jobs, which required us to relocate too. The move led us to this new place that seemed almost too perfect. The house was situated in a neighborhood that was the epitome of convenience. It was close to everything one could need: the hospital, my dad's new office, a grocery store, and of course, my new high school. Everything was just a short walk away. The house itself was charming. It was a two-story building with large windows and a spacious yard where our dogs could run around. I have two, by the way. Their names are Cookie and Crumble. I know. So generic, but I think that it fits them perfectly. Anyway, the place felt like a safe haven, a place where we could finally settle down and breathe easy. Starting at a new high school was really daunting, but I was able to manage. The school was only a 10-minute walk from home, making the morning commute a breeze for me. The first couple of months were fine, and I quickly made a few friends and established a routine. I usually went home by 5 p.m., as I wasn't the type to stay out late. I prefer the comfort of our home, where I could read, play games, and take care of our dogs. Everything seemed to be falling into place until that night. It was the birthday of one of my new closest friends. She had invited me to a small party at her house, which was about a 15-minute walk from mine. I decided to walk there as it didn't seem too far. The party was fun. It was just a small gathering of our friend group. We were celebrating, we had games, we had cake. We had a lot of fun that night, and I do not regret going there at all. But we did lose track of time, and before I knew it, the clock struck 9 p.m. So I decided to walk home, not really thinking much of it. Our neighborhood always seemed safe to me, and I'd never felt uncomfortable before. The streets were quieter than usual, the typical hum of the day replaced by the faint rustle of leaves and the distant city sounds. As I made my way home, I started to notice footsteps behind me. They were faint at first, but as I kept walking, they grew louder, and they were matching my pace. When I stopped, the footsteps stopped. When I sped up, the footsteps also sped up. I felt a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. I finally gathered the courage to turn around and look, and what I saw was a man in a hoodie, and he stood a few feet away from me. I couldn't see his face, clearly due to the darkness and his hood. At first, I thought that it might just be a friend of mine or a schoolmate. Again, I have never had a scary or uncomfortable experience here, so I didn't worry much at first. This guy didn't move though. He just stood there. He didn't say anything, and I stared at him. But the longer I stared, I started to realize that he was built much larger than any high schooler that I knew, and something about the situation just started to feel very wrong to me. I was really unsure of what to do, so I just waved my hand at him, hoping that it was just a misunderstanding, and that this guy was actually safe. But as soon as I did, he started sprinting towards me. My heart pounded in my chest and panic set in. I turned and I ran as fast as I could, not caring about the direction. I just wanted to get away from this guy. No matter where I went though, he followed me. His footsteps echoed behind me relentless. I suddenly remembered that one of the places near our house was a police station. My mom had made sure that I familiarized myself with the area when we first moved in. I thought that it was silly, but I was grateful for that now. I decided to make a run for the police station. The man continued to follow me for a bit, but when it became obvious where I was headed, he then veered off in a different direction. I burst through the doors of the station, breathless and terrified. The officers inside noticed my state and immediately asked what was happening. I explained everything, though my words came out in a rushed jumble. The officers then arranged for me to be taken home, so that I had parents with me. They let me file a report, even though I couldn't give a clear description of the man. The darkness and his hood had obscured his face, and they told me that it may be impossible to catch a man without his description, but they promised me that they will patrol the area and see if there are any suspicious people lurking around the neighborhood. I felt a mixture of relief and lingering fear at the same time as I stepped into the safety of my house. That night changed everything for me. I realized how fragile the sense of security I had built really was. I loved being a homebody even more after that incident because I never wanted to go out at night again. And if I ever had to, I would make sure to ask my parents to send me and fetch me, which is something they said that they are totally fine doing for me. The convenience of our new home had lulled me into a false sense of safety, making me forget that danger could be lurking anywhere, even the most seemingly perfect places. It was a hard lesson to learn, but one that I would never ever forget. The man in the hood was a stark reminder that being vigilant is crucial, no matter how comfortable or safe you feel. There is this street dog near my college campus that I see every day. It is one of the older dogs, so it's always sleeping and very calm in general. I live very near to the college, and my friend and me usually go for a walk late night after dinner. Tonight was no different, and we were walking around the same route. It's a residential area, so we have never felt unsafe since there are always college students or other families out on the road just walking around. We were on our third lap, and this dog was sitting at its usual spot. While we were walking past it, I was gushing about how cute it is and was clearly distracted. Suddenly, my friend said that there was a weird car behind us. I turned around to see that there was in fact a car driving at a really slow speed. The car pivoted towards us, which made me think that maybe it wanted to park where we were walking and might just be a random family only. As I was about to convey these assumptions to my friend, we hear a dog barking and then turn around to see it chasing after the car. Both me and my friend are scared of dogs, so she stood behind me hoping that I would save her, but right when I turned around, it was the same street dog. I knew right away that it wouldn't harm us. The car suddenly sped past us, and the dog didn't chase us or anything. Instead, it just stood on guard. When we recovered from the shock of it all, we both had the same realization that that dog might have just saved us. We still don't know if the car had any evil intentions, but the way it sped right when the dog started barking, the timing of it all was just way too bizarre. Plus, it was driving so slow that both of us didn't even realize until it was too close to us. Needless to say, that dog will be getting extra pets from me every time that I see it. I walk my dog every morning in the park near my apartment. It's a daily ritual. It started 2 years ago when I first moved to this neighborhood. I work from home, so if I wake up early, I can get a quick 30-minute walk in before I start my workday. The park itself is a serene place in the middle of a bustling city. There were tall trees providing shade, a small pond where ducks swim lazily, and neatly paved paths winding through the greenery. Oh, while I'm still grudgy, during the first bit of our walks, I would have to admit that it's my favorite part of the day. It's just a time to clear my head, wake up, and enjoy the simple pleasures of being outdoors. My dog, Max, a golden retriever with boundless energy and a friendly disposition, loves our morning walks much more than my sleepy ass does. He sniffs every bush, chases after squirrels, and wags his tail at every passerby. The park is usually quiet in the early hours, with only a few joggers and a fellow dog worker sharing the space. It was during one of these walks that I first noticed him. A man, perhaps in his late 30s, standing near the entrance of the park. At first, he seemed like any other park goer, dressed in casual clothes, hands in his pockets, watching the world go by. But there was something about the way he looked at me that made me a bit uneasy. His eyes followed me as I walked past, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me closely. I dismissed it as paranoia. After all, the park was a public space, and people were bound to notice others. But over the next few weeks, I saw him more frequently. He was always there at the same time, standing in the same spot. Sometimes, he would sit on a bench near the path that I took, his gaze never wavering as I walked by with Max. Ugh, he's probably just a creep, I told myself. One morning, deciding that I didn't want to be ogled by some older dude that day, I decided to change my route. Instead of taking the usual path around the pond, I took a different one that led through a more wooded area of the park. I had enjoyed the new route as I finished jogging alongside Max as the detour ended, leading back to the more public area. But then, I noticed the man standing up in the middle of the walkway, looking left and right until his gaze met mine. He immediately stopped looking around and stared intently at me. I decided to go home directly after that. I began to feel a growing sense of unease. I started leaving for our walks a bit earlier, hoping to avoid him. For a few days it worked. I didn't see him, and I felt a sense of relief. But then, he started appearing earlier too. It was clear that he was watching me, and the realization made my skin crawl. Max, being the friendly dog that he is, didn't seem to mind the man's presence. In fact, he would often wag his tail and try to approach him, as if sensing no threat at all. I, on the other hand, felt my anxiety mounting with each encounter. I couldn't understand why this man was so interested in me, and the lack of answers only fueled my fear. The situation escalated when I started finding treats for Max on our doorstep. At first, I thought they might be from a neighbor, someone who knew Max and wanted to spoil him a little. But the treats kept coming, always the same brand, always neatly wrapped and placed right at my front door. After waking up extra early to figure out this mystery, my heart sank as I saw a familiar yet unsettling view. The man in the park was leaving them. I felt a chill run down my spine. The realization that he knew where I lived was terrifying. I started double-checking the locks on my doors and windows, making sure that everything was secure. I considered even calling the cops, but I didn't have any concrete evidence. I couldn't prove to the police that this man was coming to my house to leave treats for my dogs. It would probably end up as a I said, he said kind of thing. Also, he hadn't approached me or threatened me directly. My morning walks was causing me anxiety rather than joy now. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, my heart racing whenever I saw him. He never did anything overtly threatening, no sudden movements, no attempts to speak to me. But his persistent presence was enough to unsettle me. One day, as I was walking through the park, I noticed a piece of paper pinned to a tree along my route. Curious, I walked over and I took it down. It was a note, written in neat handwriting. "You and Max make my morning so much brighter." My hands trembled as I read the words. There was no signature, but I knew that it was from him. The thought that he was not only watching me, but also leaving messages made my blood run cold. How does he even know my dog's name? I assume he'd been listening to me speak to Max as I walked him. But every little detail made my skin crawl just a bit more. This was suddenly starting to look like a horror movie. What the hell? Someone stalking me? Treats on my door? Notes in the park? I hurried home with my mind racing. I needed to do something, anything to make this stop. I decided to change our routine drastically. Instead of walking Max in the morning, I started taking him for walks in the evening. I had hoped that the change in schedule would throw the man off and give me some peace of mind. For a few days, it did seem to work. I didn't see him, and I started to relax a little. But then, one evening as Max and I were walking through the park, I saw him again. He was standing under a street lamp, his face partially hidden in the shadows. My heart skipped a beat and I turned around, deciding not to risk walking in the park at night, knowing that he was there. The treats on my doorstep continued, and now there were more notes too. Simple messages like, "Have a great day" and "You're beautiful." Each one of them made me feel more trapped, more helpless. You would probably ask me, so why not just leave the letters or the notes alone in the park? Well, he didn't leave them in the park anymore. It was in the front door with the treats. Of course, I did not give Max the treats at all, and I just started throwing away the pieces of paper left on there without reading it. I confided in a friend about what was happening, and she suggested that I install security cameras around my apartment. It did seem like a good idea, so I did. I hoped that the cameras would deter him, or at least provide evidence if things escalated further. One night, I was reviewing the footage from the cameras and I saw him. He was standing at the edge of my property, just out of reach of the camera's view, but close enough to be seen. He stayed there for a few minutes before walking away. The sight of him so close to my home actually made me feel sick to my stomach. But him turning around and leaving meant that he knew full well that I was watching him, and he didn't want what he was doing to be recorded. He knew that what he was doing was wrong. I decided that it was time to take action. I went to the police and I told them everything. They took my concerns seriously, especially given the fact that I had video footage of him, and they promised to keep an eye on the situation. They also suggested that I change my walking routine again and avoid the park for a while. I followed their advice and started taking Max for walks in different locations. I felt a mixture of relief and also sadness. The park had been our favorite place, and now I was just scared of it. I missed our morning walks, the joy of watching Max play and explore in the morning, and I am so angry that this man took that away. A couple weeks went by and I didn't see the man. The treats and notes stopped appearing, and I slowly began to relax. I still felt watched from time to time and creeped out, though I couldn't see the man. But I started to believe that maybe he had given up and had finally left me alone. But then, one evening as I was walking Max near my apartment, I saw him again. He was standing at the corner of the street watching me with that same intense gaze. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. This time, I didn't run though. I was just so angry and over it. I pulled out my phone and I took a picture of him. I wanted proof, something concrete to show the police again. He didn't move, didn't react. He just stood there, watching me with those cold and blinking eyes. I hurried home and I called the police, giving them the picture and telling them about the encounter. They assured me that they would look into it and try to find the man, and advised me to stay inside for the night and make sure to lock everything. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching me, waiting for the right moment. I barely slept, my mind consumed with thoughts of what he might do next. I felt trapped in my own home, constantly looking at the window, expecting to see him standing there. One night, I heard a noise outside my apartment. It was a faint scratching sound, like someone trying to open a door. I checked the cameras and guess who was there? Yep, you've guessed it right. The man. My heart raced as I grabbed a kitchen knife and I crept towards the window. I peeked through the curtains and I saw him standing just outside my door fiddling with the lock. I felt a surge of panic and anger. This was it. This was the moment that I had been dreading. I dialed 911 and I whispered to the operator, explaining the situation to them. And they assured me that help was on the way. But those minutes felt like an eternity. I could hear him outside, growing more frustrated as he tried to gain entry. And thank God that I had a freaking sturdy door. After a couple of minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air and I saw the flashing lights of a police car pulling up. The man turned and ran, but the officers were quick to pursue him. They caught him a few blocks away and took him to custody. I watched from the window, my hands trembling, as they led him away in handcuffs. The police questioned him and found evidence of his stalking, the treats, the notes, and even pictures of me and Max taken from a distance. He had been watching me for months. It was a chilling realization, but I felt a sense of relief knowing that he was finally caught. I, of course, pressed charges against him, and the police assured me that they would keep an eye on my apartment for a while. It took time, but I did slowly start to feel safe again. I changed my walking routine once more, avoiding the park and finding new places for Max and me to explore. The man is now in prison, and though I'm still trying to get over it, it is getting better day by day. Max, for his part, remained blissfully unaware of the danger that we had just faced. He still wagged his tail and sniffed every bush, eager to explore the world around him. His innocence and joy were actually a source of comfort and a reminder that life could still be beautiful and full of simple pleasures. Looking back, I realized how important it is to trust your instincts and take action when something feels wrong. And to the man who stalked me and my dog for months, I hope you stay rotting in prison. Hi everyone. I apologize if my English isn't too good. I'm not a native speaker, but I will do my best to write this. My name is Brandon, and I just turned 21. And if there's one thing that I can tell you about myself, it's that my health is not in a good place. I'm overweight, and even the simplest activities can leave me out of breath. My friends and family have been on my case about getting healthier, and after a particularly embarrassing moment where I had to catch my breath after a single flight of stairs, I decided that it was time to take control of my health. But I didn't want to jump into anything too intense right away. I didn't want to injure my body and end up worse off than I started. So, I decided to keep it simple and start with long walks every day. I live in a nice village, a place where people know each other, and it's generally safe. However, just at the edge of our little village, there's an area known for some unsavory crimes. It's a bit of a stark contrast to the rest of the village, which has always felt like a safe haven to me. Every morning, I'd wake up early and then go for my walk. I wasn't alone. The mornings were filled with people jogging, running, walking their dogs. And seeing them always inspired me. If they could do it, so could I. But one day, my routine got messed up. I forgot to set my alarm the night before. So when I woke up, it was already too late. If I went for my walk, then I would be late for work. So I decided to skip it. That day, I got home at around 6 p.m. and I had some chores to finish. And by the time that I was done, it was already 9 p.m. But not wanting to miss my daily walk, I decided to go anyway. I followed my usual route, but the village felt different at night. It was almost empty. The bustling morning crowd was gone, replaced with an eerie silence. Occasionally, I would see someone walking their dog, but for the most part, it was just me. One part of the village was particularly dark. It was near the park, and there were a lot of trees around. As I walked, I noticed that I was completely alone. But then, I heard the sound of crunching leaves to my right from the forested area. I didn't think much of it at first. I just assumed that it was a deer or some other animal. But the more that I listened, the more it sounded like footsteps. Me, not used to situations like this, I didn't know what to do. I stopped and I turned to look at the trees and I said, "Hello? Is anyone there?" But I immediately regretted it. Suddenly, I heard footsteps running, and it sounded like they were coming towards me. My heart pounded in my chest, and out of instinct, I just started running. I was worried that whoever or whatever was running after me would catch up. I'm not exactly in the best shape, as I mentioned, but I did my best. I ran, and I ran, my lungs burning with every step that I made. In the distance, I saw a shop that was still open. I pushed myself harder, praying that I would make it, and I then burst into the shop, scaring the clerk. I turned back and saw a hooded figure standing in a distance away. I squinted, trying to identify who it was, but it was too dark. The figure just stood there, and then to my horror, they waved at me. After that, they turned around and walked back into the darkness. I apologized to the clerk for scaring him, and I explained what had happened. He offered me some water, which I gratefully accepted, and the clerk then asked if we should call the police, but I decided to call the non-emergency hotline. The guy was gone and I couldn't identify him, but I wanted the police to know what had happened, or at least be on the lookout for it. Feeling silly, I booked a cab to get home, because there was no way that I was walking back that night. As safe to say, I made sure to set my alarm and even had a backup. I didn't want to miss my morning walks ever again. The morning crowd, the safety in numbers, that's where I felt most comfortable. Looking back, I shudder to think what could have happened if I hadn't made it to that shop. Our village, which always felt safe to me, had shown me a different side that night. It was a lesson that I didn't want to experience again. So, everyone, please, stay safe out there. This happened several years ago when I was working in a downtown jail in a large city as a counselor. I worked a weird shift and I got off at 2 a.m. So it was obviously dark when I got off work, and most of the people on the roads were people who just closed down the bars downtown. At this job, I interacted with inmates who were various levels of stable and sober, and sometimes they were released at the same time as I was leaving work. The garage where I parked was a couple of blocks away from the jail, so I was cautious walking to my car but didn't usually have issues. Anyway, this particular night, I got to my car safely and I started home. It's about a 25-minute drive. Very quickly after I pulled out of the garage, I noticed a car right behind me with its high beams on. It followed me through downtown and onto the highway and then exited at my exit. I wasn't too freaked out yet because I live off a major road. But then, it took every single turn that I did and then pulled into my apartment complex right behind me. Well, at this point, I'm getting concerned, but it's a big complex, so I just head toward my building. The car is right behind me, and I usually back into my reserved parking spot. But this car is so close that I literally can't, so I just pulled in forward. The car then drives up behind me and stops, blocking me in. At this point, I'm absolutely scared and I consider calling someone, but all my friends are probably asleep because it's 3 a.m. Calling 911 also felt like an overreaction. But I finally dial 911 on my phone, but I don't press the call button and I step out of my car. A man gets out of the car. He's tall, white, wearing a vest and a fedora. And then he stares at me. Just so you know, I'm a 26-year-old female, blonde and 5'3". He stares at me for like 10 seconds and then he says, "Oh." He then gets back in his car and then drives off. This was still one of the weirdest encounters of my life. In the school year 2022 to 2023, I was a senior at Bayshore High School in Long Island, New York. The year was going strong so far as I was getting good grades and getting accepted into a few colleges of my choice. I was sad and happy at the same time that it would be my last year. I was happy because I would move on to better things in life and I would achieve my dreams. But I was sad because I wouldn't really get to see my friends and my teachers as much as I saw them every day. I was already in the month of November, and 2 months flew by way too fast and I felt very glad. However, this one incident that happened mid-month would always come back to me every day. We had just finished up lunch and the 6th period was approaching. This would be a 40 to 50-minute class. About 15 minutes into the class, I really had to use the restroom because I drank a lot of water at lunch, and I should have done this right after lunch had ended. I asked the teacher to use the restroom and he said that I could. I walked into the bathroom, went into a stall and then did my thing. After finishing up, I was turning my head everywhere and I looked up above me for a brief second before looking back down. But then half a second later, I looked back up because I saw something that I would only see in my nightmares. What I saw was a camera up on the upper right corner of the stall and it was pointing directly at me. My whole body turned pale at this moment. I ran out of that bathroom so quick, forgetting to wash my hands, and I ran straight to the principal's office. I told her that there was a camera in the bathroom stall that I was in, and I swore to her that I wasn't lying. She could tell that I was being serious by me tearing up and being out of breath. We then walked to the bathroom together, and she saw the camera too. She had a horrified expression on her face. She grabbed a ladder from one of the storage rooms and then she climbed on the ladder to take the camera down. She then told me that she would phone the police and said that I could go home early today because I was not in the right headspace at that time. After I got home, I told my parents everything, and they had mixed emotions of sadness, disgust, and anger. I then went back to school the next day, but I wasn't better by a long shot. About a week later, everyone found out about who the person that had installed the camera in the bathroom was. His name was Daniel Garcia. He was a recent graduate in the year 2021 to 2022 school year, and then he came back to help with the drama club. Surveillance footage showed him installing the camera really early in the morning before the majority of the school would arrive. I was a victim along with one other female. I was just the first one to notice the camera. Daniel was arrested and was later pled not guilty to one count of unlawful surveillance in court. My parents and I were not happy with this, but we successfully filed a restraining order against Daniel for 3 years, along with the other victim who had been filmed. I had never felt so violated and humiliated before in my life. It has been nearly 2 years since this happened. I am having a fun life in college, but this incident will stay with me forever. I'm Susan. I'm a recently divorced woman in my late 50s. My life had been a series of predictable events until it suddenly wasn't. For 30 years, I was married to a man named Richard. We built a life together and we raised 2 wonderful children, both of whom are now grown and have families of their own. I owned a small but successful business, and with the kids out of my house, I thought that it was finally time to relax and enjoy the fruits of our labor. But life had other plans for me. One afternoon, I came home earlier than expected, and what I walked into shattered my world. There was my husband cheating on me in our own home with a woman at least 20 years younger than me. The betrayal was a dagger to my heart, and I knew that there was no repairing the trust that had been broken. I decided that we needed to divorce. There was no point in staying together if I couldn't trust him anymore. Richard made it difficult, arguing that we should give it another chance since we were older now and that I should just forgive him. Our children, however, were my rock, and they couldn't forgive their father for betraying our family like that, and with their support, I pushed through with a divorce. It was nasty, and it was draining me emotionally and mentally. After the divorce was finalized, I felt a sense of freedom, but I was also exhausted. I needed to escape, to breathe, to find myself again, so I decided to treat myself to a vacation. Greece had always been a dream destination for me ever since I watched the movie Mamma Mia. So I did it. I booked a trip, and I was ready to immerse myself in the beauty and culture of the place that I have admired from afar. If you are thinking that my scary story is because of the divorce, then think again. The scary experience that I had was during this vacation. Traveling alone didn't faze me. I had done it many times before, even before I got married. The first 4 days of my vacation were amazing, but not so eventful. It was just exactly what I needed to relax my mind and forget about the turmoil of the past months. The sun, the sea breeze, and the friendly locals were all healing in their own way. But on the 4th night, I decided to go out for a drink and listen to some live jazz music. I found a cozy bar, ordered a drink, and I let myself get lost in the music. As I sat there enjoying the ambience, a man approached me. He was handsome, Caucasian, and looked to be in his early 50s. He seemed friendly and very well put together, so I didn't mind the company. We chatted about random things, our travels, the music, our favorite dishes in Greece, and he seemed charming and harmless, and I really enjoyed the conversation. When I finished my second drink, I decided that it was time to head back to my hotel. The man offered to buy me another one, but I politely declined. He was very insistent, but I firmly thanked him and I left. My hotel was about a 15-minute walk from the bar, so I took my time, enjoying the cool night air and the quiet streets. Well, not so quiet with all the tourists around, but you know what I mean. As I walked, I happened to glance back and I saw a familiar face in the distance. It was the man from the bar. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but a bad feeling began to creep in. I picked up my pace and my heart started racing. After a couple of minutes, I looked back once again and I saw that he was still following me, his eyes clearly fixed on me now. Gone was the friendly smile from earlier, and now he just had a scowl on his face. I realized that this was no coincidence. He was after me. Why, I don't know. So, with my 50-year-old weak legs, I tried to move as fast as I could. Panic set in as I neared my hotel. I rushed through the doors and I went straight to the front desk. I was sweating and panting, and the front desk clerk asked if I was okay. But before I could answer, the man from the bar walked in and headed straight for me. I started screaming that I didn't know him and that he had been following me. The front desk clerk quickly ushered me behind the counter and then called for security. The man claimed that we knew each other and that we were together and that I was just drunk. But I wasn't afraid to make a scene. I loudly insisted to everyone present that I didn't know him. The staff said that they would call the police, and that probably scared the man because he then bolted out of the hotel. Shaken, I thanked the front desk clerk and I arranged to check out earlier than expected the next day. She understood and she was very sympathetic. I didn't end my vacation, but I continued it somewhere else. I just didn't feel safe staying in that place anymore, knowing that man could be lurking around watching me. I found a new hotel in a different part of the city, and I tried to enjoy the rest of my trip. Traveling had always been a way for me to find peace and clarity, but this experience was a harsh reminder that the world can be a dangerous place. I was more cautious from then on and more aware of my surroundings. So, to the man who offered to buy me another drink and then followed me into my hotel and lied to the clerk that I knew him, let's not meet again. I live in a very small town where everyone knows everyone else. Last weekend, a girl walked up to my porch and said that she had a friend who wanted to get to know me and asked if I was single. I told her I was, and she asked for my number. I didn't see the harm in that, as I'm open to meeting new people. A big dumb mistake on my part, and I will never do that again. She left, and about 5 minutes later, I received a text from a guy. And it turns out I have known this person for almost 30 years, but we've never met or spoken to each other. He told me that he thought that I was pretty and that he would like to get to know me better and ask if he could stop by to talk in person, and I said that that was fine. This guy then shows up with 4 other people, and it was immediately clear to me that they were all on drugs of some sort. I hadn't seen him for a very long time, so I was not expecting how he looked. His name is Carrie, and he didn't have a single tooth left in his mouth, and he might have weighed 110 pounds, 5'7" at most. I was immediately regretful. Not only were all his teeth missing, he had no job, no car, no money, and is currently homeless. I recognized immediately that this guy is trying to find a home for the winter, and he thinks that he's gonna date me. It's obvious that he thinks very highly of his looks and his charming ways. Honestly, his flirting was extremely repulsive. I got rid of him by making up an excuse that I had to be somewhere. 4 days later, my doorbell camera captured a video of Carrie walking up to my porch steps, where he decides to sit with his back to the camera. He turned and looked directly at the camera twice. It gets creepier a few days later. I woke up Friday morning at about 5:30 a.m. and I decided to smoke a cigarette. I don't smoke inside, and since I caught him sitting on my porch steps, I would check my camera for any sight of him, and I did not see anyone, so I stepped out and smoked. I was half asleep and I was staring down at the ground when I heard a voice. My head snapped up, and I'll be damned. He was standing less than 3 feet away from me. I nearly jumped out of my skin, and I screamed at him and said, "You scared the shit out of me. What the actual hell is wrong with you?" I truly have no idea what direction he came from and how he was able to walk up on my porch without making a single sound. He laughed until he saw that I was furious. Then, he started explaining that he was here to tell me that his phone had died and wanted to know if I tried calling him or texting him. The only text I sent to him was asking him why the fuck he was sitting on my porch at 3:47 a.m., and he never answered. He then leans in towards me, trying to flirt with me after creeping me the hell out. He then says, "Good morning, sunshine." Oh, I wanted to slap his ugly face. I told him, "I am not a morning person at all, so you need to go." He started explaining again why he was there, and then he started pouting and walking away very slowly, and he kept turning back to look at me like I was going to change my mind and invite him in or something. It was just unbelievable. My doorbell camera actually recorded part of this interaction. After that, he started watching me from a half block away in front of a bowling alley that has a bench that directly lines up with my front door. For 2 days, he watched my every move. It even started pouring rain, and he just sat there watching me. I haven't seen him around in a couple of days, but I'm hoping that he moved on to someone else. But my intuition is saying that he isn't done just yet. Cops know all about it, because my son works for our sheriff's department and I fill them in. This is one of the creepiest encounters that I have ever had, and I'm a paranormal investigator. I've always said that it's the living that you gotta worry about, and this just absolutely proves it. My name is Amanda, and I am 32 years old. I have been a professional writer for almost a decade now, crafting stories and weaving words into worlds that readers can dive into. I didn't think that I would end up using my talents on here, but here we are. Recently, the words have stopped coming to me. I've been battling writer's block, a curse that has left me staring at blank pages and empty screens for weeks. My creativity felt like it had dried up, and every day that passed only added to my frustration and anxiety. I kept asking myself why this was happening. Was it burnout? A lack of inspiration? Whatever the cause, I needed a solution. I believed that a change of scenery could help me break through this creative barrier. I needed a place where I could disconnect from the chaos of my daily life and then just immerse myself in nature. That's when I decided to book an Airbnb cabin in the woods, hoping that the peaceful solitude would reignite my imagination. So, I went online and I did my research, and after an hour or two, I ended up finding the perfect cabin. I booked it, and I counted down the days until my trip. The anticipation was a mix of excitement and nerves. I hoped that this retreat would be the remedy that I needed to get my creative juices flowing again. The day of my trip finally arrived. I packed my bags, loaded my car up, and set off on my journey. After a couple of hours of driving, I arrived at a small town near the cabin. It was quaint and charming, with a few shops and a gas station. So I decided to refill my tank since I was already here and pick up some snacks just in case I hadn't brought enough supplies. The gas station was small, but it was busy. There were two clerks working behind the counter. I grabbed some chips, drinks, and a few other essentials before heading to the register. As I made small talk with one of the clerks, I unfortunately mentioned that I was traveling alone to a nearby cabin to work on my writing. At the same time, I noticed the other clerk just staring at me. His gaze was unnerving, and I felt a chill run down my spine. But other than that, he didn't do or say anything to me, so I just tried to brush off the discomfort, and I quickly finished my transaction and left the store. The drive to the cabin was breathtaking. The road wound through dense forest with sunlight filtering through the trees and casting dappled shadows on the ground. When I finally arrived at the cabin, I was absolutely struck by its beauty. It was a cozy, rustic retreat nestled in the heart of the woods. The cabin had all the amenities that I needed too, including a fully equipped kitchen, a comfortable bed, and a desk with a view of the forest. My first day was productive. The tranquility of the cabin helped me relax, and for the first time in a few weeks, the words began to flow. I spent hours writing, feeling a sense of accomplishment that had eluded me for so long. That evening, I cooked a simple dinner, enjoyed the peaceful surroundings, and I went to bed feeling optimistic. On the second day, I decided to take a hike. There were several trails nearby, and I chose one that led to a scenic overlook. The hike was invigorating. I felt a sense of clarity as I took in the breathtaking view. After enjoying the hike and the view, I decided to go back so I can prepare my dinner and then continue on writing. But when I returned to the cabin, I noticed that the door was slightly ajar. I was certain that I had locked it before leaving, but I dismissed it as a mistake. I just went inside, locked the door behind me, and then continued with my work. As night fell, I heard the faint sound of footsteps on leaves outside. It was probably just an animal, I told myself, but still, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease, so I checked the locks on the doors and the windows, making sure everything was secure before going to bed. The next morning, I stepped out onto the wooden patio and then froze. There were muddy footprints leading up to the door. They were too large to be mine and too defined to be more than a few hours old. A chill ran down my spine. I was trying to calm myself. I reasoned that it could have been a curious local or someone who had mistaken my cabin for theirs. There was no crime. Nothing has been done to me other than spooking me out. There was no crime at all, so I just decided not to call it in and focus on my work. I just pushed the incident to the back of my mind. Later that night, I felt a bit tired from writing, so I decided to take a short break. I paced the room, drinking a cup of tea, and from the corner of my eye, I noticed movement outside the window. At first, I thought it was my imagination. But when I looked closer, I saw a face staring at me through the glass. But the face seemed familiar. I couldn't quite place it. My heart raced as I tried to remember where I had seen him before. And then it hit me. It was the clerk from the gas station, the one who had been staring at me. Panic set in. and realizing that he had been spotted, the man smiled at me with a twisted, sinister grin that sent shivers down my spine. I dashed to my bag and I grabbed my gun. I headed outside to confront him. I think it was just the adrenaline pushing me. The creep, seeing the weapon, fled into the darkness. My hands trembled as I watched him disappear into the woods. I had always carried a gun for personal protection. It's a habit instilled in me by my father. It was a precaution that I had never thought that I would need to use, but in that moment, I was immensely grateful for it. I decided then and there that it would be wise to leave the cabin in the morning. I packed my things, barely getting any sleep that night, always listening for any sound outside. And at dawn, I loaded my car and I left the cabin, making sure to avoid stopping at the gas station on my way back. My mind was still reeling from the encounter, the fear lingering like a dark cloud. And as I drove back to the city, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The stalker's eyes just following me from a distance. The experience left me shaken and weary. It was a harsh reminder of the dangers that can lurk even in the most peaceful settings. I'm just grateful that I trusted my instincts and I acted quickly. But the memory of that face staring through the window still haunts me. When I got home, I messaged the owner of the Airbnb to inform him of what had happened. He was apologetic and he refunded me for the remaining days that I had already paid for. It was a small consolation, but I also appreciated his understanding. And if you want to ask me why I didn't call the police that time, I'm going to be honest. I don't have any answer to that. I know I should have, but I think I was just too shaken up to even remember doing that. And now, I think it's too late to do it. To anyone reading this, I'm sharing my story as a warning. Be careful when you're traveling alone, especially to isolated places. Trust your gut and take precautions to protect yourself. The world can be unpredictable, and sometimes, danger is closer than we think. Whoever you are, creepy, staring clerk guy, I hope we never meet again. I do hope that you find the help that you clearly need, but I want no part of your twisted games. Let's start with the basics. I'm a 26-year-old male, and I work at a blind store where I'm alone during all my shift. I work from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. from Monday to Friday. It's a very simple job, and most of the time, I just look at my computer. I do some customer service, offer quotation to the very few people that enter the store, and so on. So, like I said, it's very boring and not much happens. But lately, something started to caught my attention. I've noticed that across the street, someone is looking directly at the store, and more precisely, looking at me. I don't handle cash at the store. We mostly work with credit and debit cards, so I don't think that they are planning on robbing the store or something like that. I've noticed that there is a telescope on the window, and it's pointed directly at my desk, so I think it's very obvious that this person is looking at me. I left my phone recording at me while I do some work for like an hour and a half, and I can see in the recording that this person moves the telescope once in a while, and that when I got to the restroom, the telescope moves while trying to find me. So yeah, I have not seen the face of the person or anything, but surely enough, this is creepy. Update number 1. Okay, so thank you guys for all the comments and responses to the post that I have. I didn't expect this to get any attention, so here goes some more information about the situation that I'm in and more details about the store. First, this person is looking at my desk through a door, so my blinds can protect me here. In addition to this, I moved the desk closer to a wall so this person can't see me anymore. I just did this because I was getting video proof of this person's behavior. Second, I just found out about the stalker this Tuesday. I don't know if he or she has been doing this for weeks. I just noticed now, so I'm already being really careful when I get off of work. And the third one, after reading all your suggestions, I have decided to go and have a little chat with the building administrator and show her all the evidence that I have collected. I will do this today, and I may update this weekend if something worth mentioning happens. If not, then on Monday, I will update this post. Update number 2. Hi, so I already showed all the evidence to the building administrator. Let's call her Anna, and she was shocked. More even when she actually saw the telescope showing through the window of the apartment. She told me that the apartment that has a telescope is being used by 2 girls, maybe in their early 20s, and these 2 girls are weird. The apartments are small, but they are not cheap, and these 2 girls started living in them almost 2 months ago. She told me that she doesn't see these girls leave the apartment very often, and most of the food or groceries are delivered to these girls via delivery guys. But something that does occur is that a man comes to the apartment every 2 or 3 days and then leaves early in the morning. This man is the one who actually made the rental agreement and then pays for the apartment, so he is probably paying for the food and rent for these 2 girls too. Now, Anna says that when the rental agreement took place, the man said that these 2 girls would be living here because of college. But ever since, she hasn't seen these 2 girls go to college or anything like that. So yeah, this is weird. Apparently, Anna is going to speak about this issue with the owner of the building and the man who signed the rental agreement, so this activity, or the quote-unquote stalking, stops. I will update if I learn something else. Last update. Okay, so this weekend, I didn't think too much about the situation anymore. I try to enjoy my days off without worrying about my job. So, just today, I came to work, opened the store, and I began to work. Then I noticed that the window in the apartment was closed. This window was always open, and then I noticed that the telescope was no longer there. I sent a message to Anna asking if she could tell me anything about the girls and if something was done about the stalking. Apparently, Anna, the building owner, and this mysterious man had a short conversation this Saturday. They called the man on his phone and asked him if they could talk about some complaints about the apartment. Then, they told the man that the girls were harassing the stores in front of the building. Lucky me that they didn't say that I was the one who complained. They told the man that this behavior should stop because that's not something the tenants should do. And so far, the man has been listening and paying attention to these requests. Everything was normal up to that point, but when the building owner made a question, it was a quick question like, "So, what career are they studying?" Anna says that the man changed his attitude completely, said that he should mind his own business, and then just left. Sunday comes in, and the man calls Anna to give her the keys to the apartment. He didn't explain why or said anything else. He just gave her the keys and then left. Anna is very confused and also worried about the girls, mainly because she didn't saw them when they left. I told her that maybe they left early in the morning like the man used to do. I asked if there was something wrong with the apartment, like missing stuff or damaged items, but Anna said that everything was fine and nothing was stolen or broken. Also, I asked if she ever heard a noise, maybe some yelling or anything that Saturday night. Nothing, she says. She is thinking about filing a complaint with the police because it feels wrong that they would just leave like that. If you ask me, I think the reason that they left was because the building owner asked about the girls. I don't know what to think about this. If Anna does end up going to the police, I will probably provide my testimony or something if it's helpful. I hope that I don't have to update this post again because I wouldn't want to know more about this than I should. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared because your fear feeds me.